Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call this City Commission meeting to order this morning. Commissioners, we have a number of items before us today. One of the important ones, obviously, is our presentation of our budget and taking a deeper dive into that. But we also have 3 action items. And so with your support, what I would like to do is move through the action items first and then go back. So I want to make a little adjustment to our schedule and then go back to the briefing so that we can get through the action items. The action items are all scheduling public hearings, so it's not that we're voting on any of these items today other than to put them on our agenda in a couple of weeks, 2 of them on May 14th, 1 on May 7th, to schedule a public hearing and hear from the public. So is there support for that, Commissioners? All right, great. I will start then. Do we need to do a roll call? City Clerk?
Are you all here? No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Commissioner Bowie.
Bowie, here.
Sorry. Wow.
I caught him off guard.
Yeah,
You combined your first name and last name.
I guess Commissioner Light, Commissioner Knight,
Present.
Commissioner O'Connor, Commissioner Purdue,
Present.
Commissioner Robbins,
Present.
Commissioner Sassi,
Present.
Mayor Bliss.
Yes, I'm here. All right, Commissioner. So we'll go ahead then and go to the City Commission resolutions, and then we'll do the presentation, and then we'll move to public comment after that. So with that, we'll read the first one. This is a resolution scheduling a public hearing for Tuesday, May 14th on the proposed fiscal year 2025 service provision fees. Can I get a motion?
Support?
All right, moved and supported. We have our CFO here today to tell us about this item. We also received in our packet a full list of the proposed fees.
Yes, and it's maybe a little overwhelming of a list, but you can see in the memo we do divide up the fees by category. In total, we have 1,264 fees, but we have these different breakouts of code A, B, C, D, and then the new fees. So it's really all what it is relative to cost of living adjustments, if there's no recommended changes, if it's larger than a cost of living adjustment, you'll see that on fees that we haven't moved in quite some time. So the cost of living adjustment is just a year-to-year percentage. If we haven't touched the fees in 5 to 10 years, you would expect that lift is going to be a little bit more. And then fees that are achieving less than full cost recovery. So you'll see that with, I know special events, for instance, is one we've been talking about in this budget process. So that's a fee that we do purposely subsidize. And I will be providing more of a presentation for the public on these fees. We'll talk more about, the parking rates as well as refuse fees, things like that, that are in this budget on May 14th.
Great. Thank you. Commissioners, any questions or comments for our CFO? All right, seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution scheduling a public hearing for Tuesday, May 14th, so this is the same night, on the proposed property taxes and the fiscal year 2025 city budget. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
All right, moved and supported by our first ward commissioners. Ms. Claren, you want to tell us anything else about this?
Okay, yes, this is just setting that the other public hearing we do in association with budget besides the fees is for the taxes as well as the city budget. So this is just setting that date. You'll see the table on page 2. These are now the final calculated millage rates. We have verified that with the county now. So these are the rates that will be subject to the public hearing and voted on later, and then of course the budget. So
thank you. Commissioners, any questions or comments on this item? All right, seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, it carries. All right, next that will take us to a resolution scheduling a public hearing for May 7th to consider a transformational brownfield plan for the Grand Action 2.0 redevelopment project located at Market and Summer and Mount Vernon Avenue, as well as Douglas. All right, let's see, and Lake Michigan Drive Northwest. So Commissioners, this was presented to our Brownfield Authority last week, and the Brownfield Authority unanimously recommended that it move forward to our body. And so today before us is scheduling a public hearing. Can I get a motion for that?
Support.
All right, moved and supported. We'll turn it over to Mr. Klooster. This was a presentation that was also presented, a similar one, I should say, presented at the Brownfield Authority. And then we do have representation from Grand Action 2.0 here today, as well as Rich McKeegan from Convention Arena Authority.
Mayor, if I could, before Mr. Klooster starts.
Sure.
Mayor. So thank you again, Commissioners, Mayor, for being here today. Before Mr. Klooster starts, and I know that we have a very important topic to discuss, I wanted to take a point of personal privilege and acknowledge the work that he has done over the years. Some of you may be aware that he has recently announced his intent to separate from the city, and we are so grateful for the work that he's done while he has been here. It's hard to imagine the Economic Development Department without his steady hand, but I know that he is making the right decision for he and his family, and I wanted to just take an opportunity to personally thank him for the work that he's done, to include the work on this transformational project.
Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. And I think I speak for everyone around this table, especially probably myself, who've worked with you the longest, that you will be greatly missed. So.
Thank you. Because you have a lot to talk about today, I'll just...
And he did smile. Did you see that, Commissioner?
It's been a pleasure. Thank you. I think, as the mayor said, introducing this item, this is scheduling a public hearing for your next meeting on May 7. And so because this has been presented briefly at Economic Development Project Team and to the Brownfield Authority, some of you have had an opportunity to hear about this in more detail, but just to make sure that there's a common level of understanding before the public hearing, we'll run through this presentation pretty quickly and then, of course, come back to it on the 7th in full detail and responses to any questions you have next week. So you're all aware of many components of this project. The transformational brownfield plan that's been submitted does cover all of those properties in their current configuration, including adjacent rights-of-way and property that will be developed as a river trail. There's really 4 components to this project. 2 are being led by Grand Action. That's the Acrisure Amphitheater and then the Grand Rapids Soccer Stadium. A lot of detail has been shared about those. A lot of community engagement has been conducted around those projects. The amphitheater is a 12,000-seat amphitheater on what we affectionately call 201 Market for the time being, and then the soccer stadium would be developed on the areas 7, 8, and 9 on the west side, including a portion of the current YMCA parking lot over there. 2 other components are future developments that at this point in time are conceptual and need to be further advanced by private developers who are yet to be identified, and they would be residential and mixed-use projects. So as a high-level summary of all 4 components together, it's nearly 20 acres of property around downtown, up to 735 residential units between the 2 private development projects, $715 million of total estimated development costs, construction of the River Edges Trail between 131 and Welty Street. Future phases would include up to 1,300 total parking spaces, both ramped and surface spaces, and estimating 238 total full-time equivalent job opportunities with the wages shown on the screen there between $18 and $43 an hour with an overall average above $25 an hour. So to geographically orient you, you're very familiar with these properties. High level on the transformational brownfield, because this is more rare. You did see a Factory Yards project come to you last year. Was it 2 years ago? Man, I don't remember. Time flies. Transformational brownfield, for all intents and purposes from a local perspective, it's very similar to traditional brownfield, where the incentive that's being approved and recommended to you by the Brownfield Authority and what is within your purview to approve is local property tax capture. The remainder of the incentives come from state sources, state income taxes, state sales and use tax exemptions, and state sales tax capture at the completed project. Requirements to qualify for transformational brownfield, in addition to having eligible property, the project must be anticipated to have a transformational impact on the local economy and community development. That'll be described, and I don't think that's in question here. And the minimum investment for a project in Grand Rapids has to exceed $100 million. So again, far exceeding that minimum requirement. The transformational brownfield opens up additional eligible costs, essentially all of the hard construction costs for a project, so over $550 million for this series of projects, and then the additional incentives are described here as well. And I'm sorry there are transitions. I can't figure out how to get rid of them. Briefly on each project component here, just the investment amount and some high-level details. The amphitheater is a $185 million development cost with $132 million in construction, 54 plus ticketed events per year. 48 of the jobs are associated with this project. It will be publicly owned and operated by the Grand Rapids Kent County Convention Arena Authority, our partner that operates the Van Andel Arena and Voss Convention Center, and does so very well. This also includes the development of the river trail adjacent to this project and stretching south to Wealthy Street. Future phases will involve parking, but that will come along with the residential development. There's a table like this for each of the components of the project, and really a lot of numbers, but I think the point I'm trying to make here is that I'm highlighting the local portion of this. And so for the amphitheater, and you'll see for the soccer stadium as well, the transformational brownfield brings state incentives to these projects, but not local incentives. Adjacent residential to the amphitheater, again, needing a private developer, and these numbers are conceptual, therefore, and projected, hoping that this project can get going next year. And as proposed currently, it would have 475 residential units on top of a 6-story parking ramp that would have 815 spaces. Rents, again, are proposed here. They will be further evaluated by a private developer in the future. Very different evaluation here. There are significant local and state incentives proposed for the residential development. That's really, at this point, what the Transformational Brownfield Program is really intended to support, is these projects that bring a lot of vibrancy and density and opportunity to urban core communities in the state of Michigan. So in addition to the transformational brownfield, we would anticipate a neighborhood enterprise zone exemption would be considered in the future for this project when a developer is identified. Similar high-level details on the soccer stadium, $172 million project with $127 million of construction costs. I think the details are pretty well known, 17 soccer matches and more opportunities for lots of other community events at this facility throughout the year. More jobs associated with this project, 104 full-time equivalent jobs estimated, again, owned and operated by the CAA, and there would be additional development as part of this project as well, providing retail and restaurant space, concessions, the things associated with a facility of this nature. An adjacent open-air plaza on the southeast corner. Similar to the amphitheater, again, incentives for this project are derived from state sources under the Transformational Brownfield Program. And the similarly conceptually proposed project adjacent to the north of the soccer stadium would be a mixed-use project with 260 residential units. Again, the rents are anticipated and proposed at this point, will be further evaluated in the future. This project ideally would have additional retail and office space, and estimating 84 jobs would be associated with this project, and it would also have an integrated parking ramp. This property is currently owned by the DDA. And similar to the proposed amphitheater housing, again, incentives derived from both state and local sources here. And then this is a roll-up of all of the 4 tables you've seen so far. So obviously a very significant incentive. These are complicated projects. The amphitheater and soccer stadium are public-private partnerships, obviously with very non-traditional financing sources, and this is an important component to that. And then as to the residential and mixed-use projects, this is a great opportunity for the city to consolidate the transformational brownfield application with the amphitheater and soccer stadium and then these future developments to provide that incentive and confidence for a private developer to look at this project and be confident that an incentive is not just proposed but is actually available, and provide the level of confidence and financing to undertake these difficult and expensive projects in these locations downtown. I believe from the conversations around factory yards, you're aware that there are additional incentives available under the Transformational Brownfield program if there is some component of affordable housing proposed. I suspect you can imagine the complications with that in the current state, given that we do not have developers for those residential projects. And so what we're recommending to you for your consideration is to enter into an agreement at this point that would be transferable in the future. So what we're proposing is a program that would provide options to be determined at a future date and to be considered and approved by this body at a future date, but that would satisfy the requirements of the Transformational Brownfield program for approval in the near future. The options as proposed here would result in either some level of affordability at the projects themselves, and the level of affordability here is consistent with what the Brownfield Authority has adopted as its requirements under its interim guidelines for the housing tax increment financing program. So that was kind of our benchmark for the first option. And then the alternative option here to be determined in the future would be an annual contribution as opposed to providing some level of affordability at the project, making a contribution to the city's affordable housing fund or some other investment vehicle that is available at that time that would provide a similar level of benefit in the community. So these are options that, as staff, we feel confident recommending to you that provide a benefit to the community. There's more flexibility, obviously, with option B to implement alternative programming and to provide different types of affordability, both rental and home ownership, and for longer periods of time. But at this point, without a developer and without a financing scheme arranged, it's something that we don't want to set as too strict of we don't want to cause problems for ourselves in negotiations in the future. And so this would be our best recommendation at this point in time, consistent with the objectives of the city. And then, as with all projects, we do get inclusion plans identifying the priorities and opportunities for participation by minority, women-owned, and micro-local subcontractors in the project. At this point in time, we have one inclusion plan. It's for the amphitheater. We would expect more in the future. As you can imagine, the amphitheater and soccer stadium are complex projects. They're very non-traditional. People don't build things like this very often. And there are very large scopes associated with this project that are only able to be performed by a small number of firms. So what you're seeing here is a target of $6 million on a $110 million construction cost. Segregating out the very large and complex scopes takes out about $42 million of that cost. Working with Pioneer and their partner Barton Mallow on this project. This is a goal that is identified as realistic. I think if the stars align, everybody believes the opportunity is higher than this, but the stars don't always align. And the opportunities, I think, as we've been working with Pioneer, extend beyond the contracts that might be represented by dollar amounts here, and extend into partnerships with smaller local subcontractors and with educational institutions and nonprofits in the community. And so we look forward to keeping you up to date on that progress and reporting on that along the way. And we will get more inclusion plans in the future that you'll be able to get information about as the projects come back to you with more details. So this is intended to wrap up everything that I just talked about in one slide and identifies the timelines, the costs, the jobs, the local incentives associated with this transformational brownfield project. As the mayor mentioned, we do have Ms. Carol Wood here from Grand Action 2.0. And we will all be back for the public hearing next week. And so if there are any questions, we'd be happy to take them at this time or come back with a similar presentation in approximately 7 days.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that. That's a great overview, and I really appreciate the breakdown with the different slides and charts. I think that's helpful because it is a very confusing project that has different components to it, some of them publicly owned and some of them private. And so I appreciated the breakdown and how this PowerPoint was put together. So thank you both. Commissioners, any questions or comments? Again, what's before us today is to schedule the public hearing for May 7th. All right. Seeing Commissioner, our Brownfield Authority representative, I know you had some great input and questions at the Brownfield Authority meeting last week.
No, I felt compelled to say something because this is obviously a big project. We have talked about it numerous times, not only at the Brownfield meetings, at our Economic Development Project Team meeting as well. And I know there's been a lot of engagement. I think just one of the things to continue to share, I think, as we get forward with the public hearing is that funding piece, because I think there are some cities throughout the country that are utilizing their own funds. I don't know if specifically it's their general operating funds or capital funds, what they might be across the city. But I think to continue to highlight what is the financial stack to make this happen and what we're doing in this process, obviously with the bonding pieces, but this is not taking away from something else. This is really, I think Ms. Wood brought it up at the last meeting. It is private investors who have invested in the city who are deciding to do that again. It has been, yes, work of Jono, Ms. Behrens is out there, and city manager and mayor working to kind of get all these pieces together. Obviously, it needs to go to some state bodies, so that's why there are some things that, as you mentioned, Jono, are not fully baked, but we also don't want to miss some of the critical deadlines to ensure that this project can move forward. And so while I think there still may be some questions, the Brownfield Authority felt that those were answered by Jono and Ms. Wood and gave some realistic projections. So I think we appreciated that as well, as not just being honest about what is possible on the MLBE side, what is the potential opportunities on the housing side. But I think that is something, if anybody's watching, people care, is to continue to look at that financial piece. We're not taking away from something else. We can do a lot of things all at once, and I think that would be critical as we go for that public hearing, because we're also we're going through our budget cycle process as well. So I again thank Jono and the team. I think we did the calculation, quick math with Brooke from Housing Next, who's on our Brownfield board, looking at over 1,000 units. Obviously, you saw a variety of area and median income levels, but as we just voted on those zoning reforms last week, that is going to add to that stock overall, which hopefully then creates an environment where people can move from, maybe one set of housing to another, and obviously, it's not the only type, but I do think that is an important piece about the number and what we're able to add in one project. So, thank you.
I appreciate you saying that. I know, and that's why I appreciate how well these slides are done, because I do think it is important for us to reiterate that these are performance-based incentives. So if these projects don't come to fruition, no taxes are generated and no taxes are captured. So it's not that there are a significant amount of taxes being generated at either of these sites right now, largely because they're publicly owned. And then if no project moves forward, no taxes are created and the developer can't capture those. Commissioner?
Thank you, Mayor. We're clearly excited about both of these transformational projects, both being in the first ward. But it's also, I think the other exciting part is, the two trailing private developments. I think a lot of the concerns we've heard as a commission have been around, housing and parking. And so to see that both of the trailing, proposed private developments, work to address some of those, especially looking at that soccer stadium site and GR Forward years ago, which we trailed with some zoning changes to, allow that increased density along the highway. And so to see a building of that proposed scope, I know it's just conceptual, but the idea that, a project, we made a forward-thinking decision about where we wanted to see housing developed and to see that, that can be a significant component of that site based on, a plan and a zoning change and now a, proposal to see something like that happen. And I know that this hopefully isn't the end of the other, adjacent supporting infrastructure and housing and parking type projects around these sites, but it's great to see that there's, an immediate plan to bring some of those to fruition right away.
Okay, seeing no other comments then, I'll call the question, and again, this is to set the public hearing for May 7th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, carries. All right, thank you, Commissioners. Now that will, I'll backtrack a little bit up the agenda to the presentation that we have before us today, and that is a presentation on the proposed fiscal year 2025 budget. I'll turn it over to our city manager.
Thank you, Mayor, and I continue to be excited about this year's proposed budget. There's a lot of different things we're accomplishing, and with your leadership and the vote that you just took as part of some of the future plans and funding, as you mentioned, in terms of our potential to support debt services that will be reimbursed by private investment. So a couple things we'd like to accomplish here today before we get started in the details of the presentation. One, I continue to be very appreciative of all the department leadership and employees who continue to ensure that this community is informed and in a very transparent way about the proposed use of public funding. And so I appreciate the work that has been done to date. In addition to further our transparency, we have done two things. One, you've asked questions last week, and we have compiled both questions and responses, and you should have received a copy of those in your email this morning. We will post those questions publicly on the website so that the public can also be aware of them. There may be copies around here somewhere, hard copies if you need it. Secondly, in light of the fact that the budget is very complicated process, because it's not simple when you have 30 different units of business, unlike some companies where they have a singular focus and singular products. You have so many different services. You have services that are running 24/7, 365 days a year, as well as the type of financing that's related to governmental financing from a variety of forms. We have tried to condense the summary of the budget into a citizen's guide, and Ms. Claren and her team have done a real good job for second year in a row having a summary document that the general public could use if they choose not to read the budget in its entirety. So I'll just ask her to real briefly give us an overview of the citizen's guide for the budget.
Things of that nature. And then just flipping through, you'll see a lot of similarities to what we presented last week, just high level, what's going on with this year's budget. Page 11 shows, the proposed budget in brief, what we are appropriating, and then the high points of things we focus on. Another item in here is, of course, that ARPA investments, pinpointing different investments at each of our strategic pillars, like governmental excellence, health and environment. We're talking about public safety today, actually next. So some of those high level key investments we're making in each of these areas. And then towards the back half of the packet that you received, you'll see, a breakdown of revenues and expenditures, property tax distribution, things like that. And then at the very back, you'll see that we do have, sorry, I lost my page. We do have all of you, as well as the the public knows, who's my commissioner, things like that, who are our appointed public officials. And the very last page are, the major resources for residents. If I have a question on my property tax bill, who do I go to? Or, property tax information, assessor's office, that kind of thing. So again, if there's any questions, happy to answer, but these will be, we'll print hard copies for the clerk's office. It's also available online, and we'll have a stack outside during the budget season for the public to pick up if they want a copy, so.
All right, thank you. Okay, so with that, we will proceed with getting into the details of the next section of our workshop. And I ask the departments who are here to present for public safety if they'll come up, all of them at once, so we won't have to have any delays in the presentation. So today, Mayor and Commissioners, what we'll do, we're intending to cover 3 focus areas of the budget: safe community, economic prosperity, and affordability, governmental excellence, and engaged and connected forum, And Mayor, what I'd like to do is go section by section, let all the presenters in the section present, and then pause and take questions. So we'll have police, fire, OPA, and the courts present, pause, take questions on safe community, and we'll move on to the next section, if that's okay.
That's okay with me.
All right. So with that, if someone could advance the slides. Jody, are you able to do that? Thank you. So you'll see the budget work session, so we'll cover the topics I mentioned today. And next week, we'll continue with more focus on infrastructure, vital streets, stormwater commission, as well as mobility and health and environment. And if you go to the next slide, I mentioned the focus areas that we'll cover today, and we'll begin with safe community. Next, just go right ahead, and they'll continue to highlight on the focus areas that you've touched. Next, please. And we'll start with the fire department. Chief Brown will kick us off.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us here today. Have just a few high-level slides, and then, of course, we'll get into more details on some frankly, very exciting construction projects that we've been working on. I always like to start with our mission statement. To me, that's a good true north. That's what you are investing in as a city and as commissioners. And the mission for us is to value all people by saving lives, protecting property, and responding to the needs of the entire community. And each one of those words is there for a reason, and each one of those words is very important to us. High-level overview, we're looking at a staff of 233 for FY25. Our residential safety program is continuing, one of the most aggressive residential safety programs in the entire country. And then finally, a large focus is going to be on our new construction projects. You're not intended to be able to read that eye chart to the right. It's simply a backdrop. That's our roster. And each one of those colors and boxes means a different thing, with rank and acting assignment and light duty and a myriad of different things. So my Deputy Chief of Support Services, Chief Freeman, is a very busy man, and he does a great job of managing the 200+ people for the fire department. I will walk you through a brief history, though. So last year, right after I made chief, we were at 210 for authorized strength, and I'm sure you remember we had quite the overtime issue that we spoke about several times. With your support, with the hard work of the fiscal office and support of the executive office, we were able to add 13 firefighters. I'm happy to report as of last week, those additional firefighters are out in fire suppression answering calls. It wasn't a quick fix, but it was a strategic investment, and we expect that to have quite a significant impact in our overtime. More on that later. This fiscal year, we're looking at 10 additional staff to open up the new Kendall Avenue Fire Station, which will correct years of underperforming metrics in the 3rd Ward. We are extremely excited about that project. We do continue to utilize civilian and part-time staff wherever we can. Fire prevention, the residential safety program, and the public educator, those are all civilian staff. And then we do call people in on 700 Club and even have part-time civilians to supplement where we can. We did speak about our cadet class last week at Public Safety. We're going to turn right back around now with a timing of our recruits and run another cadet class this fall. And then that will lead right into our recruit class first thing next calendar year. And I'm happy to report, for the first time that I know of, the fire department's recruit classes are now built into the budget like police. And so we don't have to come back to you every year when we're ready to hire a class. If it's within that certain range that we've predicted, the funds are available, and it makes a much more efficient and timely process for everyone. Operating budget just under $44 million. The one thing that I will point out here, personnel services. About 15 years ago, we were at 88%. 88% was spent on personnel. Under Chief Lehman, we got that down to about 86%, and now with my tenure, we're at 84%. That's a good spot to be, and that's my recommendation that we stay there. What this means is we're spending sufficient amounts of money on our infrastructure, on our maintenance, on all those things that it takes to support those people that actually get on the truck, go down the road, and help people. So to me, that's a very good trend. On the capital projects, the one project I want to point out, it might seem insignificant to you, but it's not. The $462,000 in dorm remodels. For those of you that haven't been to a fire station recently, we still sleep in one big open room, just like the old military barracks. And there's no privacy. We don't sleep very well. When we do get a chance to nap for an hour or two at midnight to 2 a.m. Because we're out a lot. And what we've discovered is good sleep is critical for our people to be able to function. And so this next fiscal year, we're going to be able to remodel the dorms and provide more sleeping separation for our staff. This is something they've been asking for a long time. This is something management has wanted to do for a long time. And I believe in FY26, we're getting around to the bathrooms, the restrooms. So we're finally modernizing some of our facilities. And that's a good place to be when the average age of fire stations is over 70 years old. New construction projects. Okay, the Kendall Fire Station is 100% grant funded from the state. The floor plan has been completed, and we have engaged the planning division for the city, and we are excited to engage the community later this summer. We do have a construction manager on board and anticipate starting site work this summer. So the current house will come down and the groundwork will get started. We are looking at a 12-month construction time frame. This is a pretty simple building in terms of commercial construction. So they are pretty confident that around that 11 to 12-month mark is where we're going to be for construction. So we anticipate next late summer, early fall, cutting the ribbon and starting to answer calls out of that new station. So I will tell you, this has been almost 15 years in the making. 15 years. And some of you up there remember this. I've been here that long as well. And it's so great to see these things finally come to fruition. I anticipate some questions on this and look forward to these later, but let me just give you a quick flyby. We are looking at a training campus out on Panel Road, 850 Panel. With your help, we were able to acquire 9.5 acres of vacant, frankly underutilized industrial land out there. And what we've been able to design over dozens of meetings, we've seen this campus grow and shrink, and we have finally settled down on a plan that will accomplish everything. But we have also done a lot of engineering and looking at building materials and shared spaces to get this down. So on the left side of that picture, that really emulates our current training center. So for those of you that have come to our training center, walked in that bay and seen Terry's house in that high bay, we basically took that and replicated that out on that site. On the right side of that picture is fleet and facilities. For those of you that don't know, we have a huge annex at our current training center. We have an annex at LaGrave. We store rigs at the south annex where the Division Avenue station is going. We have fire apparatus all over the place. This will allow us to combine it into a singular location, greatly increasing our oversight and efficiencies and potential to maintain these items better. In the middle are the classrooms and what the CM has termed a gray box EOC. So a gray box means we're planning on constructing the roof and walls, and that's it. And if the EOC earmark funding comes through in that funding stack, then we'll finish that out. And until then, we'll just keep operating with our current EOC within the police department. So we have a lot of options here. You'll notice the state grant, the city bonds, an economic development authority federal grant, EOC earmark. We were unfortunately turned down the other day from Grand Rapids Community Foundation, but earlier this week, late last week, we put in for the Fry Foundation, and we're still seeking other avenues as well. So there's a lot of different players at the table on this one. Construction manager is about 2 weeks out from giving us a revised estimate. I am told it is significantly less than the first two based on all the changes we've made. I'm happy about that. And the rest of this year is going to be just spent planning and site work. Wrapping up on the new construction, you'll see three pictures here. Top left is our current Division Avenue Fire Station, constructed in 1926. Top right is the old Indy Image building that we purchased a few years ago. And I'm telling you, if you have space, the fire department will fill it up. We have overflow training, we have our candidate agility testing, HR uses the space, community groups use the space, and we have offices and our fleet and facilities work out of this building as well. So that building needs to come down. The training center is 2.5 years out from being finished. So the bottom right is East Leonard Elementary School. We've had a couple great meetings with GRPS, and they are in process of drafting an MOU. I need to reach back out to them this week and see the status of that, where we would occupy East Leonard for 18 months or so while the training center is constructed. This truly is a win-win. They didn't exactly know where they were going with that building, and we're going to be good neighbors and move in and maintain that structure and keep that going. So quite a complicated project there. And then to wrap up, I'd like to cover some horizon issues. Obviously, new construction, the remodels are top of mind for me. Our current station maintenance, my assistant chief is in the back, and we've already been on several phone calls this morning. With 18 distinct locations and that age, every day something breaks. And so we're constantly trying to catch up on maintenance. Hot sustainability at the fire department. I also spoke with our hot team this morning to check on a few people. That started out of a need to make sure people were medically safe during the pandemic. They did a great job, police, fire, Network 180, working with a lot of different groups. As this has transitioned to more of an outreach and less medical focus, I think it's time for us to take a step back and see, are we accomplishing the work in the most effective means possible? It's not saying that HOT won't remain in some form or fashion at police, at fire. I certainly think we have a role there, but I also think that there may be better trained people out there to deal with mental health and social work than firefighters. So don't really know the next steps on that, but I'll be working with city manager just to keep looking at that. Currently, we have a student at Eastern Michigan University. Their thesis is looking at a fire truck maintenance program for Grand Rapids. So if we are able to build this facility and if it's cost effective, we may be transitioning, instead of spending close to $1 million a year with vendors, bringing that in-house and having much less downtime, better parts availability, and better direct control over our fleet. Currently, there's a 4-year lead time on new fire trucks. We have been able to mitigate that by purchasing stock fire trucks through a group purchasing option called Sourcewell, and intend to keep doing that. So we are able to get fire trucks in just over a year to 18 months versus people ordering custom rigs. Influx of population. You just heard Mr. Kluster talk about all the development, which is great, it's exciting. What that brings with it is more people, and police and fire are pretty much the same here. More people equals more service demand, more calls. And so we're not nervous about it. We're excited about these opportunities, but it is something that we're going to watch, especially in this downtown core. And finally, to circle back to the adding of staff, we are estimating a little over $1 million in overtime savings as compared to this year during FY25. So that is the fire department overview. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chief.
Thanks, Chief. All right, the police department, as you can see, we have a majority of our budget will be headed towards our personnel costs as well. Next up for a plurality would be our contractual obligations and internal service charges. You see FileMaker upgrade, one of our capital upgrades. That's important for better data and better transparencies, making it easier to provide FOIA documents. And then you'll see Bomb Squad robot. Bomb Squad is one of the things that you don't hear very much about, not very visible, but especially in this time. They've been very busy with our recent VIP visits, Vice President, First Lady, former President. They've been doing a lot of work, and they do an excellent job. Service areas, the police department, the city is designated 5 geographic service areas, which we have covered, authorized for 304 officers. We have 286, which is a tremendous increase from when we started, and that doesn't include 9 that just started in the academy. 87 non-sworn staff, including 4 additional, which are in this budget for dispatch, which of course benefits not just police, but also effectiveness of communicating with our fire partners. Personnel does cost, as I mentioned, 84% of our budget, and as of today, even though we are still not quite at full capacity, we have a tendency 85% of beats are covered with a designated officer. 76,000 calls is about how many we do every single year. Also in this budget, we want to keep our exceptional detectives. I have a quote there, which is one of my favorites. Certainty of being caught is vastly more powerful deterrent than the punishment. And our detectives have the reputation for solving crimes and want to keep that up. When I was a new detective back in 2005, I was trained the most important part about being the detective is knowing how to get a confession from someone. That is vastly changed. The most important part these days is understanding and ability to properly use technology. And keeping up with that is something that is accounted for in this budget. Programming with neighborhood associations. This budget will continue to give us the ability to cooperate with our outside partners through our DICE program, Boys and Girls Club, Cure Violence, and others. The SEPTED program, which is very well received out in the community, is accounted for in this budget. The more officers we have, the more you get to see police officers. And when we have had the capacity to have officers on bikes and officers on foots, I get phone calls and I get emails from individuals thanking us in the community because they want to see the officers out there. Accounted for as well in this budget, continuation of our exceptional co-response team. I was president at the Crisis Stabilization Unit grand opening yesterday. Senator Stabenow made a point to come over to me and specifically compliment our co-response program that we have with our officer and social worker, and looking forward to continuing and increasing that. Path to full staffing is, so when I started 25 months ago, we had a survey done through the GRCC's Academy, and the recruits weren't applying to us because they saw lack of city support. And I have been sitting in this chair, and I've been sitting up standing up at that podium for the entire time I've been here, and I know that we have city support. I know we have city support from the community, and I know from this body, city manager, everybody. So what I saw was a failure of leadership from police department leadership just to communicate how good we had it with the support that we were getting. That has been communicated. It's been resonated. I can't thank you all enough for showing support, especially when policing as a profession has been such a hot topic politically. The city has really stood by the police department and put us in a position where we can be successful. And that's what's gotten us to the point where I'm thinking when we have this discussion next year, we're going to be talking about the full staffing we have, the foot officers, the community policing officers will be back, all of that. I'm so optimistic about our city, about the crime trends that we're seeing in a positive way. So thank you for that. Another thing is way of support. The best way to get good recruits is to make it a good place to work. And with your support, we're offering the best training. We're focused on officer wellness. Treating the workers, the employees of the police department well. We budgeted for 3 recruit classes in this fiscal year. We're looking at 2 for next year. We're doing a great job attracting lateral candidates, so those lateral candidates could make the difference of whether or not we come back and ask for a 3rd class, but that's an exciting problem to have, asking for the capacity to hire more. You'll see when we have more officers, you'll see a reduced response time. Improved officer wellness, the officers are complaining less. There was a lot of mandatory forced overtime. No one wants to work on a rare weekend and be called up on Friday night and say, hey, you have to be here Saturday morning to work a race or something like that. So it's good for the officers' mental health. It's also good for presence in the community. All the positive community interactions that we look for. The Boys and Girls Club, I recently took over as chair of the board of directors there. Big proponent. They're doing fantastic work, and we want to have an increased footprint of our police officers there. As I mentioned, you'll see more bike officers and foot officers, not only downtown, but out in the neighborhoods. And we are scheduling the actual return of community policing officers as we approach that magic 304 number. Last bullet on there is crime prevention. Data shows, since data has been collected, 80s and 90s, that more police officers do equal lower crime. Again, thank you for the support. Their recruiting efforts, a huge part of that has been the EPIC recruiting project, which we had paid for in fiscal year 24. We're still reaping the benefits of that as the support from them extends through fiscal year 25. Interview Now, which is a way to contact potential recruits on a real-time basis with a recruiter over the internet. Recruit classes, our intern programs has been a great pipeline for Grow Your Own. Those men and women in the light blue shirts that work the front desk, they're doing real police work. They're taking reports. We sometimes have them assigned to various other things, to doing traffic. Our vice unit, our detective unit, they're getting real experience in policing, and many of them then, as they are close to graduating college, apply to be in our classes. And since I've been here, I would say probably 40% of the individuals we have come from the intern program. I mentioned before the dispatch center, but we love a more efficient and responsive GRPD, and with 4 emergency communications operator will get us closer to the industry standard of how many operators you should have answering 911 calls and dispatching those calls. We're going to see a return of community police officers. Since I've been here, that's one of the drum beats I've heard. We want to see we want to know the officer that's responsible for the area. We're going to return those officers and civilianize what we can civilianize. If you don't need an individual with a uniform and gun to do a job, they shouldn't be doing it. And with the help of this body, again, we've been able to civilianize a subpoena service. That's going to free up one more police officer to do actual police work. The crossing guard program is in our budget. There's been an increase because it was called for safety reasons with our youngest pedestrians. a small amount for tire deflation devices, and those are preventive devices to stop a vehicle that is lawfully and legally stopped, which what we've seen is oftentimes pursuits will start after the individual has had a chance, the officer has had an opportunity to legally stop the vehicle. The officer knows that the vehicle has a potential to flee, and we don't have any way to stop it. We advise our officers not to stand in front of the car with their guns drawn, as would happen in years past with so many tragic results. However, tire deflation devices are extremely beneficial. We've seen them in other cities across the region, and if we can prevent a pursuit, we would rather do that than engage in a pursuit. Of course, you see a picture there of our new scales. It's actually what they look like for enforcing truck laws on our roads. Looking for some support for new uniforms. As you can tell by the picture there, we've transitioned to an outer vest carrier instead of, as you can see, the uniform that I have. You can't see my bulletproof vest. It's under my shirt. But what we've seen in the profession is being able to take heavy items off of an officer's belt is extremely helpful, especially those officers who are sitting in a squad car for quite a bit of their career, quite a bit of their lives. Officers with 20, 25 years end up with serious back issues. And so industry standard says if you can transition a lot of the equipment to the upper vest, there's been a huge benefit. So that's what we're doing for our newer officers over attrition. Unfortunately, it's not free. We have also needed to get all new holsters for our improved taser because of our new Axon contract. The new taser extends almost twice the distance of the old taser. It can activate 5 times more than the old taser. So we're very excited to get those tasers as a new, more effective, less lethal weapon, but we need a brand new holsters for all of them. FOIA has been a topic of discussion here. We have, with your support, added 2 full-time staff to the records unit. They are still continuing training, but already making contributions in that area. Increased efficiency with just FOIA. Only bad thing about that is it's great because it's increased the efficiency of our employees responding to FOIA. It's also made it that much easier for everyone to request FOIA, which is great. We're all about transparency, but it's upped our numbers a little bit. We've seen a consistent increase in those FOIA numbers. Looking forward to making an even greater dent in the backlog. Finally, horizon issues. We're looking for grant opportunities to even increase the size of our victim services team. As I mentioned, it's possible that we come back looking for a third academy to reach those staffing levels. Firearms registration law has increased the burden on our staff downstairs in the front desk of the police department, where now almost every firearm you have to get a license to purchase from the police station. So we're continuing to monitor that to see if we need to add an additional employee for that. It's a 2 to 3 week wait time as it is right now. As I mentioned, the co-response team and the wonderful work they're doing has been noticed by many people out there, and including the officers. Even some who were skeptical at the beginning now see it just as an invaluable contribution, and we're going to look to continue to support and see where we can increase that. Mentioned the detective unit. We have such exceptional and professional detectives, and we want to stay up and ahead of the times to make sure that the sophistication of criminals doesn't exceed our own sophistication. So looking to support them. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Davis.
All right, thank you and good morning. Excited to have the opportunity to talk to you about the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability. So we'll start with our mission as well. The mission of OPA is through targeted change, accountability, restorative justice, empowerment, and engagement. OPA will help create and improve just outcomes and respectful relationships between public safety and community. And I really want to pause at that, help create and improve. That really speaks to the city's approach to how we do public safety here. This is a collaborative approach. We recognize that no one city department leads public safety 100%. It's that collaborative approach that allows us to move in a way that best serves Grand Rapidians. We also lead with our values of true justice, which are transparency, responsibility, unity, equity, and justice. And that is in addition to the city values, which of course we apply as well. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about OPA staffing. The first thing is there are only 3 city-funded positions in the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability. So that's the position for the director, as well as an administrative support position and our lead oversight specialist. We also have 2 justice analyst positions. Those are grant-funded positions that are supported by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, which we're so grateful for that support. We wouldn't be able to do the work we do without that support. In addition to that, we do have some temporary positions, which are also super important to our department. That includes the expungement position. We'll talk more about expungement on another slide, and as well as a position that's focused on community engagement. We have an intern working with us as well. Shout out to Alexis, who just graduated from college last weekend. In addition to that, we have a Bloomberg Fellow. Unfortunately, that fellowship is ending, and quite honestly, I'm struggling with it, but that fellowship is ending. Moran has been an amazing addition to the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability and really has helped us with our data management, and we will certainly miss him when he is gone. So this is a breakdown of OPA's budget generally. The thing I do want to point out and make sure there's a clear understanding about is that over 50% of our budget is devoted to the Axon contract, which of course it increases transparency and accountability in our police department. But when we think about OPA's numbers, I think it's important to note the distinction there. So just under half of our budget is used for OPA's programs and staffing and things of that nature. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about our Know Your Rights program. So our Know Your Rights program has been one of the most successful programs in the Office of Oversight and Public Accountability. It's a 4-part program, and I won't go into all the details, but essentially this program allows us to work with community members to help them to understand their rights and responsibilities in interacting with police officers. So we talk about what to do when you're stopped by police. We also have one that is specifically designed for immigrants and refugees, and we've had quite a large number of organizations and individuals who've requested that training. One of the great things about this training, and I don't think it's offered this way anywhere else in the country, is that we tailor our Know Your Rights program to countries of origin for our refugees and immigrants. What we do is look at the laws in their home countries and say, how do we teach them the laws here and explain the pivotal differences so when they interact with law enforcement, they understand those rights. So we've done over 26 workshops in this fiscal year. I've had over 300 community participants. There's been 38 organizations that we've worked directly with. And we've had that those Know Your Rights materials translated into multiple languages. Of those materials, over 3,000 have been shared. We do surveys related to our Know Your Rights programming, and we've had great responses. 93% of the individuals who completed those surveys has said that they have a better understanding of their civil rights and increased confidence, and importantly, a reduced fear when interacting with law enforcement. We also have heard that 96% of those participants recommend the Know Your Rights program to their friends and neighbors. We'll spend some time talking about the traffic stop study. So thus far, we have completed the proposal for the design and strategy. As you know, we're working with the Harvard Kennedy School with this traffic stop study. We also have worked in collaboration with GRPD. We're grateful for their support in this space to get the initial round of data that's necessary to do the analysis, and that initial analysis was done. Based on that initial analysis, additional data was needed to move forward. So now we have requested that second round of data, and we anticipate receiving that from GRPD soon. After we receive that, the next level of analysis will take place between July and September of this year. We anticipate having an initial report drafted to talk through with stakeholders between October and December. And then we would publish that with the support of city leadership at the top of next year. Excited to talk about our expungement efforts here in the city. As many of you know, our expungement program started with a one-day event that we would host once a year. Really, at last year's event, we had such an amazing turnout that it was almost overwhelming, to be honest. We're grateful for all the community support that we get to do this. Individuals from our attorney's office, the city attorney has participated, and deputy city attorney and others to provide free legal support, and other attorneys from around the community do that as well. We have volunteers that come in as notaries. We have volunteers that come in to help stuff envelopes. We have volunteers from all around the community that understand the necessity of helping our community members get back on track, get a clean slate, because obtaining a clean slate, obtaining an expungement has the ability to change their entire lives. In fact, here we have a testimonial from a member of community who had a CNA nursing job for 9 years. They were convicted of a CCW back in 2016, which is carrying a concealed weapon. As a result of that, they were rejected from employment for over 7 years. By working with OPA, they were able to change their life. They were able to get back on track. And one of the things that they said was, I thank OPA for a second opportunity at life and bringing back my confidence and my happiness again. They went on to specifically request that the City Commission continue to support these efforts because they change the lives of individuals and community. And they're back working as a CNA, and they've been admitted to nursing school. So this is one of the things that makes me happy to come to work, right? We see the change that's happening in people's lives, and I'm grateful for the continued support in this area. Speaking of our expungement fair, this Saturday, May 4th, is this year's expungement fair. It will be held at the Kroc Center again. We are asking people to pre-register, but we are accepting walk-ins. But we want everyone to know, if you are a walk-in, you are likely going to wait. There will likely be a long line, so please come prepared for that, but we will help as many people as possible. A process improvement over the last year is that we have begun offering expungements year-round, and we have seen a steady flow of individuals coming into OPA just requesting that assistance. So this year, 412 pre-screened applicants for the fair and 207 so far have been eligible. We also have our community informed training program, and this is a unique program where we partner with the police department, the fire department, and other members of community to offer trainings that our community members say they want to see our law enforcement and public safety members have. So you'll see a list of some of the trainings that we have already implemented, and also trainings that are in the final stage of development. So far we spent about $4,500 in those initial trainings and have about $64,000 left where we'll be spending on those last 11 trainings. One of the things that is super exciting about it is that the community members who are coming in, first of all, they feel heard. We're elevating resident voice in city operations. They see the impact in our public safety departments, and I'm grateful for our public safety departments who have been very open and willing to work with community to make this happen. Next, that takes us to the I Am the Dream Civil Rights Youth Academy. And the I Am the Dream program is an 8-week civic engagement program that's really targeted at middle school scholars. Now, we targeted middle school scholars for a couple of reasons. First of all, when we look at crime data, we understand that individuals who are likely to be highly impacted by crime, that doesn't just start once you graduate from high school. It starts at younger ages. We understand the pipeline from school to prison, and this is one of the programs that helps to interrupt that pipeline. So not only does it help to reduce violence, but it also creates a pathway for individuals to become involved in our law enforcement departments once they graduate and are ready to be employed. We introduce them to civic engagement. We introduce them to city systems. We introduce them to public safety departments. We hosted 2 cohorts and wrapping up in this fiscal year, going into this fiscal year. So one started in June and went into July, and then we had another in February of this year. Highlights from those programs included the Honorable Kellen Dodson, who supported in our second cohort, and also Officer Javon Sanders, who also helped with our first cohort. OPA intends to improve this program and continue with this program and expand this program. So our plan is to host at least 3 cohorts in the upcoming fiscal year with no cost increase. And that leads us to Cure Violence. And Cure Violence is one of the most important parts of our collaborative approach to law enforcement. As you know, Cure Violence came out of a request from community and support by this body as well as the city manager, saying that we wanted to see additional ways to reduce violence in our community. We respect and support the work of the police department, but understand that there's a lane for community as well. So Cure Violence essentially uses three areas to interrupt violence. One is to interrupt the transmission of violence. They detect and interrupt potentially violent conflicts. They identify and treat the highest risk individuals, and they mobilize the community to change norms. And we've been fortunate to work with the Urban League in order to accomplish this over the last 3 years now. So when we talk about things that have happened in fiscal year 24, curriculum was designed to facilitate systems within the Kent County Juvenile Detention Center. Again, this is another space where we're going to another level of connecting with our young people to reduce violence. There was also a bilingual violence interrupter hired to increase engagement within the second ward in particular. There's newly renovated spaces for Cure Violence staff and to help reach the needs of participants. Staffing was increased from 8 to 16, and we know that was because of the expansion from the third ward to the first, second, and third ward target areas. And we'll talk more about that as we move forward. There was also a specific intention to increase relationships with the Grand Rapids Public School systems and key stakeholders in that space. Our third ward target area is fully operational and continues to see success, and we'll talk about that success on future slides. Our first and second ward neighborhood impact began within the last 90 days, and what we mean by that is although it was approved at the beginning of the fiscal year, there still was a time for staffing and for training and to really get those new teams up and going. And you may recall that when we did the first year of the third ward, it was a similar space. We had to get the team staffed and trained and up to speed before we could really get them as boots on the ground. And now we do have our teams as boots on the ground. With that being said, 90 days is way too early to determine impact in the first and second wards. So when we look at our target areas, you can see the target areas for each of these spaces. Again, Cure Violence has a target area approach. Now, one of the great things about the Urban League is they're really working everywhere, right? If they see that there is violence happening, they are going wherever they can and connecting with whomever they can. But the model is designed to work in specific target areas, meaning you find credible workers in those target areas, individuals who have lived experience that make them credible with community members to really work through those spaces. So you see those target areas there. When we talk about the implementation of Cure Violence over the last 3 years, specifically in the third ward, we've seen a decrease of about 53% in aggravated assaults in our target area, and there's also been a decrease in the number of homicides in that space. Again, when we talk about this is a collaborative approach. We recognize the police have played their part, other community stakeholders have played their part, but the Cure Violence Initiative most certainly has played its part as well. And this evidence suggests that there's a strong correlation between the implementation of Cure Violence and the reduction of violent crime within that target area. That tells us that the model is working. And you can see that decrease in numbers in the graph provided. Repeated activities with high risk and medium risk individuals, and we're talking about young people between 16 and 25, are a source of ongoing study for Cure Violence Grand Rapids. So they're working on ways to plan interventions for individuals who continue to have interactions with law enforcement. So when we talk about the Cure Violence budget, the fiscal year 24 budget from a city allocation point was $455,000. And we break that down. Prior to fiscal year 24, the city's allocation was about $275,000. Initially, we were paying $125,000 to Cure Violence Global, which is the parent agency. That's for licensing, that's for training and technical assistance. So when Cure Violence Grand Rapids has questions or they need to get staff up to speed, these are the individuals who we contract with to do that, and we are required to do that. Additionally, the Urban League's current cost is different than that. So in the third ward, that's $745,000, but for all the target areas, that's over $1 million. We see the breakdown for fiscal year 24 as well. Looking to fiscal year 25, there's a $250,000 allocation. Those proposed funding levels will be used to support the continuation of programming in the third ward. We must note that at the level of $250,000, that does not support full programming in the first and second wards. However, if we are able to get the grants that we've applied for, we'll apply those fundings to continue to support the third ward and the first and second ward. And my last slide, getting to horizon topics for OPA. It's important to note that our Kellogg positions, those 2 justice analyst positions, will expire at the end of this fiscal year. We are also working and looking into a case management system. We continue to be concerned about our jurisdiction, although it is greatly improved with the last collective bargaining cycle. Lastly, in the upcoming fiscal year, OPA intends to do one-to-one audits of complaints that fall within OPA's jurisdiction. And with that, I'll pass the pointer. Thank you.
I think before we started with court, we're glad to have presiding Judge Ross here today, and would also like to acknowledge her before we get into the administrative presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Angela Ross, all of you know me, and I just want to introduce my financial administrator for the court. The chief so eloquently gave their budget report, but we have a financial administrator who definitely knows the numbers better than I do. We stick with the courtroom. So I'll introduce Mr. Fisher and we'll have answer any questions that you have.
Great. Thanks, Judge, for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Judge. As Judge Ross indicated, my name is Dan Fisher. Tanya Todd couldn't be here today. She has a conflicting appointment in Lansing. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the 61st District Court, we provide a venue for the fair and equitable legal process for the people of Grand Rapids. We are built of 74.5 full-time staff with an additional 9 grant positions. We have a wide jurisdiction, which includes the city of Grand Rapids, where we oversee misdemeanor cases, a variety of civil cases. We initiate and run the early process for felony cases, which in 2023 were over 2,000. It's also worth noting that the process for handling felony cases does not result in revenue. That goes to the circuit court. We also process civil infractions. These are typically the most efficient case types, as hearings are not typically requested and tickets are usually paid on time and in full. In 2023, we experienced a 22% increase in civil infraction filings. We also facilitate the expungement process, jury services, and host weddings. Now, since the 90s, the 61st District Court has been a pioneer in problem-solving courts. Since then, we've expanded our programming to include a drug court, 2 sobriety courts. We have an upcoming domestic violence court and a community outreach court. The community outreach court's a special one. I was part of the process when it began. It's a collaboration with different city entities and community partners that brings the court to the community and serves the unhoused population and those that risk at becoming unhoused. It removes the barriers to justice and promotes success. Now, the problem-solving courts in general, they provide an individualized approach to addressing underlying issues that contribute to criminal behavior. By embracing the problem-solving court method, we're able to shift from being a reactive entity to a proactive. We can intervene at an early point. We can respond and prevent crime by doing so. Data has shown that this model works at reducing recidivism and enhancing public safety. Now, in order to operate these specialized programmings, the court receives funding from several grants. These include federal, state, and local contributions. Notably, we recently received an eviction diversion initiative grant through the Community Development Department. Collectively, these grants provide $1.8 million in active funds that are being used in this current fiscal cycle. Now, one of the key initiatives we're undertaking is the transformation of our alternative sentencing department. We've embarked on a transformative journey to reshape alternative sentencing. We're moving from a standardized revenue-driven model to an individualized holistic program. The vision of the future includes leveraging community service as a powerful tool for rehabilitation, societal contribution, and the promotion of restorative justice principles. This is projected to be cost neutral for the city, with potential long-term savings realized by the court. Through these adjustments, we will ensure improved community integration, enhanced procedural justice, a deliberate focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and making concise efforts to remove barriers to justice and success. In circumstances where work crew is still warranted, we have connected with the county and have access to their work crew. Now let's take a peek at the staffing and case counts and how they've evolved over the years. Now, since 2010, numbers have ebbed and flowed, averaging downward, and we see a sharp decrease right at the pandemic era in 2019, 2020. At fiscal year 21, the court was the only city-affiliated institution to lay off staff members. We lost 6 staff at that time. In FY 22, we lost an additional 5 grant positions that were tied to our domestic assault response team. Thankfully, and what's not shown here on this chart, is we secured funding to bring in 2 new grant positions this year, recently in front of this commission. That facilitated the process to bring in a domestic violence course or case coordinator and a sobriety court case manager. In terms of cases, again, we've seen a drop in the last 13 years, most notably along the line of the pandemic. However, I want to bring attention to the civil infraction drop that again occurred near the pandemic era. Civil infractions, as previously mentioned, typically are the most cost-effective cases that we have. This reduction impacted the case total as a whole. In calendar year 23, 26% of our total revenue was derived from civil infractions, but only 8% of our total hearings. Conversely, felony cases represented 16% of our hearings while not providing revenue. From 2022 to 2023 calendar years, our total case count has increased 18%. Now, last week at the kickoff of the budget presentation, Commissioner Robbins asked about the state law that outlines district court funding. This law was written in 1968 and currently dictates funding requirements for the district court in Michigan. The governing body of each district funding unit shall annually appropriate, by line item or lump sum budget, funds for the operation of the district court in that district. This topic has been discussed at length in both local and state levels. We're not unique. In 2017, the Michigan legislature created a trial court funding commission. In 2019, that commission posted its findings and unanimously concluded that the existing funding system was broken. It was imperative to create a stable and consistent funding source for Michigan trial courts that removed trial court judges from the role of raising money. Along with that findings, they provided the governor with recommendations. Of those recommendations was the creation of a trial court fund to distribute funds to district courts based on operations. Also, to provide court technology needs. On that note, we are currently in line to join the state-operated case management system. Transferring to this system will reduce our budget requests in future years by over $100,000. Admittedly, this is a slow process, but recent action steps are bringing us closer to that goal. Now, Tanya, in order to allow us to benchmark our operations to other courts, reached out to other district courts within the state. We received a whopping 12 responses. Of those responses, none of the courts were self-funded. The respondents included courts such as Plymouth, Warren, Muskegon, among others. But here's the thing. Grand Rapids is a diverse city with a complex socioeconomic landscape. As a court serving this community, we face distinct challenges that arise from issues such as growing unhoused population, poverty, and substance use. These factors necessitate a specialized resource and targeted support to ensure equitable access to justice for all residents. Even if we had encountered a self-funded district court in our survey, drawing direct comparisons between our financial requirements and those of a smaller, more affluent court would be misguided. Such comparisons fail to account for the fundamental differences in our social and economic position and the unique needs of the population we serve. Now, in part, this is why in 2020, the Grand Rapids Comptroller's Office conducted an internal audit of the court staff. They compared the court staff services to the state court administrative office's mandated services. We were below the threshold needed to provide our operations while also maintaining proper internal controls. We have not added full-time staff since that point. Now, let's take a look at the revenue sources and the budget for the upcoming fiscal cycle. In order to provide services, the court receives money from multiple sources. In total, our revenue request is $13,284,932. This includes both internally generated funds and externally provided funds. On the internal side of things, we have the court collection and filing fees. We also have processing fees, which is revenue derived from our drug lab, which serves outside jurisdictions. External portions include some state contributions in the form of judicial standardization, which contributes to their wages, and to a much lesser extent, case flow assistance for OWI cases, which brings in roughly $24,000 annually. In our operating transfer capital, we see just over, I'm sorry, this is a different slide. I'm sorry, this is different from what we had submitted. Okay. I'll jump back to that last one. I apologize for not looking at that slide. Our operation transfer capital projects is just over $1.1 million. This is in reference to 2 bonds taken out for the court building. In December of this year, one of those bonds will mature, reducing $56,000 annually. And in December of 26, we will have another bond matured, which will reduce the impact by $1.125 million annually. And then there's the court-requested operating appropriation of $9,216,193. This is what's needed for the court to maintain its operations. I want to address a comment made last Tuesday comparing the court's appropriation request to that of the parks. While it's essential to scrutinize all public expenditures, it's equally crucial to recognize the unique functions and constitutional mandates that the court system upholds. The court, as an independent branch of government, requires specific resources to operate effectively and fairly, ensuring not only the administration of justice, but also upholding the public safety and constitutional rights. Directly comparing our budget to the parks overlooks the fundamental differences in our roles and impact within the community. Moving to the expenditures, which you all have had a look at so far. This is where we've allocated our funds to allow us to sustain our essential services and operations. In total, our expense request is $13,685,789. I've categorized these expense requests into broader categories to help understand where funds are going. We have our personnel budget, which includes the lion's share of the expense, roughly 58%. As previously indicated, even with those figures, we're still below the comptroller's audit report of necessity for staff. We have our operations and overhead, which include the lease agreement with our county building, among other items needed to facilitate the internal processes. I want to note on this portion as well, in addition to the maturing bonds, we have also made recent progression with cutting costs by selling back 2 courtrooms to the county. Miscellaneous services and other transmittals, that includes services such as interpretation, legal fees, jury payments, and transmittal costs, transmitting funds to the state and county. Collectively, within these 3 broad categories, 96.4% of our total budget is being consumed. We also have our IT, which includes software and equipment and office supplies. And then, as a 0.2% of our budget, that little purple sliver at the bottom corner, that's our training and conferences budget. Very minimal. This budget allows the court to function leanly and provide necessary and equitable service to the community. Now let's take a look at the nuances of the court revenue streams. This topic is one that is often misunderstood or otherwise not considered. We see the proportion of court hearings against the generated revenue by grouped case types. We spend the majority of our time and hearings on cases that simply don't provide much revenue. In this particular graph, we see that ordinance traffic, ordinance misdemeanor, felony, and state misdemeanors make up roughly 70% of our hearings, but only provide 26% of our internal revenue. This disparity is not indicative of inefficiency, but reflects the court's prioritization of justice and due process over financial gains. Case revenue aside, the court is involved with many tasks that don't affect revenue. The eviction prevention program and the eviction diversion program have helped our neighbors struggling with evictions. These programs have assisted over 1,100 people at the risk of eviction. As previously mentioned, we process felony cases. These are eventually remanded to the circuit court, and again, we don't receive revenue. We perform record checks and expungement hearings. In 2023, we scheduled 230 expungement hearings. And we participate with civics education through outreach and hosting events. We have taken significant steps to reduce spending and ensure equitable assessment of collections and fees. Most of the items on this list we've touched on already through this presentation. Grand Rapids residents should not face a judge who needs money from a defendant to satisfy the demands of operating a court. The reliance on court-generated revenue to support operations creates a troubling dynamic that can compromise the impartial nature of the justice system and disproportionately impact those with limited financial means. As stated by the Trial Court Funding Commission, the solution relies on actions taken by the state legislator to change the funding model. We're behind you on that one. Until this happens, the district court must rely on the city to provide funding to allow us to provide fair and equitable services to the people of Grand Rapids, ensuring that every individual, regardless of their financial situation, has equal access to justice. At this point, I believe Karen had some points that we wanted to share.
Good morning. Yes, I'm just going to speak to the legislative portion of this. As some of you may be aware, in 2017, the Michigan legislature did create the Trial Court Funding Commission through Public Act 65. The legislation was enacted in response to People versus Cunningham, which is a Michigan Supreme Court decision that determined state law does not provide courts with the authority to impose costs upon criminal defendants to fund the day-to-day operations of courts. A final report and 5 specific recommendations was issued on September 6th of 2019, and the city supports the report and recommendations and has prioritized advocacy with the state legislature to see these changes enacted. COVID did delay consideration of a permanent and sustainable fix for trial court funding, but that issue is coming back to the forefront. The law that currently authorizes trial courts to impose costs incurred for court operations is set to sunset on May 1st of this year. And House Bill 5392 will extend that sunset to December 31st of 2026. This did pass the legislature on April 24th. And it has been presented to the governor for signature, and she is expected to sign. This will allow time for consideration of legislation that will provide that permanent solution for trial court funding, and the Legislative Affairs team will continue to prioritize this advocacy for an action on a permanent solution.
Thank you. I appreciate that input. This slide will be the conclusion slide of my presentation, our presentation. The 61st District Court, we greet over 100,000 people annually through our doors. We handle important city topics such as substance abuse, domestic violence through our problem-solving court's individualized approach. We focus on housing stability through eviction prevention programs and our eviction diversion program. We facilitate the expungement process and handle speeding and traffic violations. We're the 61st District Court, and we are very proud of the work that we provide our citizens. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners, for your patience. A little court theater on the end there. I feel like I was in a movie. If we could, Mayor, if we could go back to the beginning and maybe section by section, see if there are questions on fire and police and OPA.
Okay.
How to keep us aligned in our thinking, if that's okay with you?
Yeah, that's fine with me. All right, let's start with Chief Brown. Commissioners, any questions or comments about the fire?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Thank you all for this information. I just had one quick question about the submission that was made to the Community Foundation for the station. Did they give any reason why they declined?
No, they were initially interested. Both the GR Community Foundation and Fry Foundation were to support the cadet program. We're going to have a specific classroom at the new training center, and so we were focusing on bringing young people in, educating them, and getting them good middle-class jobs in the city, and I guess it just wasn't a great fit at this time.
Okay, thanks.
All right, Commissioners, any other questions specifically for Chief Brown? Commissioner?
Thank you. Thank you all for the presentation, the time. I know you all had to practice this like 15 times, right?
Oh, we were supposed to practice?
Just kidding.
Hey, they got it right the first time.
I know there's practice. So my question is on, so you talked about the overtime costs being reduced by $1 million for next year.
Right.
What was the total overtime cost this year? Can you give me the comparison.
We're not there yet. So,
What is it on track?
Yep, so I will tell you, at the beginning of the fiscal year, my initial estimate was 5.
Okay.
When we came back mid-year, it was 4, and now we're in that 3.6, 3.8 range, so it's
Okay.
below 4 at this point.
Million.
Below 4 million. And I will
Be
tell
very
you.
clear, Chief.
Yes, below 4 million. And I will tell you, with the new recruits hitting the streets, we've already seen a significant decrease. So we're working very closely with fiscal to nail in that final BA that we'll be bringing back to get us through the rest of the year.
And then whatever that final is, you're projecting $1 million less for this next.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, we should be in the mid 2 million range next year for overtime,
All
so
right.
a significant decrease.
Okay, thanks. No, I think sometimes we've talked about the numbers, but then
I know.
it's hard to, thank you for reviewing that. I did have a question. I mean, obviously, this conversation on HOT is a bigger conversation, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
But could you share a little bit? I thought in one of the, either the public safety meetings or another commission meeting, we talked about sort of the level of training that you were working towards for sworn staff, I think, like around the paramedic recognition. So I
Right.
just wanted to understand how that perspective on the training, because I know that was something that seemed like it was a point of pride, and then how does this tie into, you talked about medical calls and other calls.
Right. So it's similar but different. So
Okay.
HOT is specifically outreach for unhoused individuals. The medical outreach programs that I discussed on our tour, it doesn't matter if they're housed or unhoused or in a facility, it's looking at those frequent users of our 911 system and seeing if we can be more proactive in that. We are transitioning to EMT level this spring, and then once that's underway, we're going to refocus on our medical outreach program. But understand, I have one 40-hour EMS chief. That's it. So to stand up a new program is difficult, but I will tell you, this past week, we've had multiple ride-alongs by ER docs with our downtown crews, and we're working every angle to see if we can work with GVSU, MSU, Corwell, Trinity to try to figure out a way to do this. So, yeah, it's underway.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, any other questions for Chief Brown? All right, seeing none, we'll move forward to Chief Winstrom. All right, I think I'll start, and then I'll turn to Commissioner. So Chief, I have a few questions. Do you want me to give them all to you?
Sure.
Or one by one? All right. So first one, I'm curious when you anticipate we'll be back to being fully staffed. I know that's been a bit of a moving target, but I'm curious if you have any projections on that. I am curious if this summer we are going to utilize support from the county for downtown patrols. I know we did that last year on a couple nights a week. So I'm curious if that is being planned again this summer in anticipation of an uptick in, obviously,
Activity.
Thank you. Two more. One more related to SEPTED. I think I sent this in an email a while back, but I'm curious if we're doing proactive enforcement of our SEPTED ordinance. And then my last one is related to Boys and Girls Club. One, I'm delighted that you are actively engaged on the board and that you're now chair. I'm a big fan of that program. I'm curious, are we going to be doing summer camps out at Camp O'Malley this summer?
I'll answer the last question first.
Okay.
We just switched camp directors, and we are, that's been a big topic of conversation, so we're headed in that direction, but we haven't solidified anything.
Okay, all right. I know lots of young people who've gone out there, and it's been
We're
life-changing
excited.
for
I
some.
actually have not been there yet. Our last board meeting was going to be there. We switched camp directors. I think the next board meeting is going to be there, and we're very excited about it. A lot of people on the board have been there for decades, and they're very excited about utilizing that space because apparently it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's fabulous. All right, okay, other ones.
Okay, fully staffed, if I had to estimate, I would say 1 year from now, which is a lot sooner than what I thought. Now, it's part of the challenge has been attrition, and we've seen those classes that were hired in the late 90s either retire or decide to stay. Deputy Chief Rogers, who had to run, is in that group, and she signed up for the 5-year extension, as did several others. So really, attrition has slowed, hiring has increased. If that continues, and we've had a lot of success with laterals. We have 15 that started yesterday in the building for training. They graduated the GRCC's Academy. Of those 15, though, 4 were laterals from other local agencies that have seen Grand Rapids as now a destination city, a destination department. If you want to be the best, go where the best are, and that's here. So we plan to keep that up. And so I think that the conversation a year from now at this table will be, well, I'll just say we'll be at full staffing. As far as assistance from the county, so last summer we teamed up with the county. We have a mounted unit. We've trained a few more of our officers on the mounted unit. What we don't have is horses, but the county has horses and they keep horses, and it's part of our cooperation that they'll have an event and a couple of our Grand Rapids officers will go support them. And with that, we will see the mounted unit, which was partially funded this past summer by DGRI, actually paid for the county officers to come, and we'll be reaching out to them and see if they'll like to keep it up. Many positive interactions with people downtown. Kids love horses, adults love, everybody loves horses. So it's a great way to interact with the police officers. The officers that we have on the mounted team, very gregarious. All our officers are gregarious and friendly, but the ones on the horses are especially so, and so are their horses. So it's positive. So expect to see the mounted unit down there. As far as actual enforcement, I wouldn't expect to see the Kent County Sheriffs doing, street stops and things like that downtown. They're invited to. It's their county as well. But I think our officers are doing a fine job and being very responsive. SEPTED, that is, I am going to fail you, Mayor. I know we have 2 officers assigned to assist in code enforcement, and I know they're very active because I get an update on a regular basis as far as what sort of proactivity they take. I can certainly ask Kristen Turkelson to back me up.
Ms. Turkelson, maybe this was more appropriate for you.
Yeah, so the SEPTED ordinance is actually under the Planning Department's responsibility for enforcement. Yes, we do proactive enforcement. Admittedly, during the time of COVID, we did a lot more education and outreach, but yes, we have proactive enforcement. Remember that the ordinance is specific to certain businesses that sell alcohol, tobacco, cannabis, et cetera. Happy to work with the city manager to provide an update of how many businesses we have, how many inspections have been done, et cetera, if that's something the commission is interested in.
Okay. I know I've received complaints. I've passed them along, but it would be nice to have more proactive. I don't know. I just don't know how that we're doing complaint-based versus proactive enforcement, especially on some of those businesses where we know there have been significant issues in the past where they tend to be more hotspots. So I think an update on that would be helpful. Yeah, thanks. All right. Thank you, Chief. Let me know about camp.
I will get that information back to you.
Okay,
Mayor.
thanks. Commissioner?
Thank you, Mayor Bliss. Chief, thank you for the report. You stated in this report that there's, despite officer vacancies, 85% of city beats are covered 24/7, 365. What happens in that 15% that is not covered? Are the statistics significantly different than the beats that you are covering?
Though, what happens is you will simply not see a police car as often. I live on the northeast side of town by Huff Park, and I very rarely see police cars. But when we do assignments on a day when we don't have enough officers to cover, we look at call volume. And so therefore, areas where there's a higher call volume is where that officer will be designated. So it's simply, we'll see less police officers in the area. Certainly, if you call 911, the officers will come. If there's a situation, the officers will be there. But you'll just see less officers.
So it's just based on statistics that you have and data that you have where those 15% is identified as not being necessarily having to be covered 24/7.
I would shy away from saying having to be covered because I think they should be covered. But we just like how we prioritize 911 calls, we prioritize our personnel where they're needed most. And when we're shorthanded, we're going to go where the call volumes are.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, Commissioner.
Thank you. Commissioners, other questions for Chief? Commissioner?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. I think you're going to go on record as being somebody seen out in the community as much as Commissioner Knight. I often get reports of people just saying that they see you out in different spaces. And I know you're one person, and as a leader, we always want to say, like, we're not doing it alone, but thank you for your personal commitment. I know there's been times when I called you on a holiday about something that has happened, and you've personally gone and addressed it, so I appreciate that.
Thank you, Commissioner.
It's interesting that you said it in months, 25 months, okay.
Months.
So I did want to say that. My question was around the beats, and so, but Commissioner Goey asked that question. For the comment on this, I think this was more of just like a clarification. You mentioned the community development grants, so for going to neighborhood associations, so that wouldn't be something in your budget, but you're highlighting that other, is that what you were doing, highlighting that other funding?
Yes, highlighting the, yes, we are only part of the co-producing public safety along with them. So
I just wanted to be sure.
I just want to talk about other people's money too.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. And then, glad to see the pieces on the civilianization. I think that goes back in line with, before I was on the commission, but with the Hillary Hyde study, what can be done and civilianized, I think is good staffing use. I think this question was asked last week, so sorry, I guess I have a bunch of comments and not really questions. But on the crossing guard piece, I think one of my colleagues asked this, and I didn't get a chance to look at the questions yet this morning. So you talked about, obviously, some requests for some community that were requesting this. Is this something that GRPS is reimbursing us for? Is this something?
No.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to understand that. I mean, obviously, school safety is important. I think it's like everything is important. Priorities isn't supposed to have an S, but it does. But just, I think as we're having these multiple conversations about, the deeper conversations about the court system, what are the things that need to happen and where do we leverage in the right way? So thank you for confirming that. On the FOIA piece, again, I wanted to ask so the software piece, that was probably something that was done maybe just in the last 6 months or 90 days? No?
I'm looking at the city attorney.
Phone a friend?
Yeah, we've been working on it since probably about last year. We did, I don't know if you remember, we did an audit, had an outside consultant come in, made recommendations, and the department took on all of the recommendations, and part of that was the software. And so they've worked with my staff, my FOIA staff, and gotten fully up to speed. It's working well, to my knowledge, and they're working hard to try to get caught up. We're still probably about a year out, unfortunately, but they're working hard to catch up, and the system does allow a lot more efficiencies, especially out facing to the community, which, like Chief said, has increased the numbers. And what I've asked recently from records is a monthly report on what those numbers look like, and so we'll start reporting that out along with our FOIA numbers.
Okay. And then we did have, because obviously, I don't think, we haven't had a FOIA appeal. I think maybe we've had one just this year, but we did have a few suits that had come before us, so.
Those are still pending, and we're still working through that.
Okay, thank you. That was my other question there. And then I guess this is just lastly, I think I said this in our last meeting, I said in our mid-year, many of you know, almost all of you know that, my family has been unfortunately a victim of some serious violent crime over the last couple of years, one that's been solved and one that isn't been solved. And so just kind of going through that process, you see the challenges that are associated with going through the process. And I had the fingertips of calling you and calling city attorney, calling the mayor, and it still took a lot of time. And so I just want to say to my colleagues, I'm very supportive of more support for our victim support services, particularly those that are experiencing it as it related to domestic violence. And the crimes, the one that occurred to my husband was something random and unexpected. But the pain that goes along with being in an intimate relationship, probably parenting, this probably goes back to the court process as well, is just, I think, good public policy for us to consider. Majority of homicides are occurring with those that are engaged in an intimate partner violence. We've seen some really horrible stories. I mean, each story is horrible, but when you hear of young kids being in cars and you hear of people being left where they're left, I think this is a part where I'm glad to see the advocacy on behalf of the department to recognize that, yes, it is certainly what is the presence we have, what is the community engagement, getting those community officers, but also recognizing what are the root causes of crime and being a part of that as well. And so just to all of you, our colleagues, as we go through that process, I think I asked that question about a mid-year budget piece. I'd like to see that for a full year. I certainly get that we might make mid-year pieces with different cadet groups and cohorts, because that requires a lot of kind of bringing together. But when we think about an individual person, I think, yes, nobody's ever hired on day one of fiscal year, unless it's probably carrying from over. So I just want to continue to say, this is like one of my top priorities that I'd like to see in this budget, and hope that we can have some continued conversation about that. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, other questions for our chief?
Mayor, before we go on, I want to respond to the last comment from Commissioner Isasi about the funding. So we did reply in the Q&A, and there are a couple things you may have heard earlier. CFO mentioned leverage funding with a grant, but even without that, the police department, we visited this past week. I think the soonest they anticipate being able to hire someone will probably be around September, October, if they start the recruitment process expediently, given all of our experience. So it is not problematic if they were able to start that process and start a person a couple of months earlier for this fiscal year. So between their $60+ million already funded budget and the planned resources that we have, along with the leverage funding, don't anticipate any problems if they were able to find a candidate sooner than when the general fund portion of the position is started.
All right, Commissioner?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just two quick questions for you, Chief. Similar to what Mayor asked about Kent County, was there an MSP presence downtown last summer as well? And if so, will they still be present this summer as well?
So the Michigan State Troopers, they have a constant presence on the highways in our city, but they also do spend time on a regular basis. We don't control the schedule. We do get informed. Occasionally there is a Michigan State Police helicopter, which does auto theft missions, which I get a lot of calls about helicopter noise complaints. They will give us a heads up usually when that happens. So requests such as those in Saginaw, Benton Harbor, Detroit, Flint, et cetera, they man those cities 24/7. We don't have that relationship with them. They are all invited. It is their state as well, and oftentimes we'll do some sort of joint mission, but on an ad hoc basis, I guess is the short answer. They'll let us know when they have the capacity and when they're looking to focus. If there is a specific mission that they have, oftentimes we'll plan ahead. We did that surrounding the Kia Hyundai Spike, but we don't have anything on the radar. But you'll likely see them, and like I said, it is their state. They do have jurisdiction, but we don't make the sort of requests that other cities do to actually have them patrol our city.
Okay, and I think last year maybe we had some conversations around eligibility criteria for their consistent presence in our city downtown area versus some other communities that have larger problems with activity. But I would still be curious to be persistent with that, just to see, as we're still getting staffed up back to full level, what they're able to offer. And then kind of going off that, you mentioned being back to our full staffed number potentially within a year, which is commendable. Obviously, I think there's a lot of great work going on within recruiting and community presence and rebranding and establishing our department as the state-of-the-art department in the state and region. But I guess curious, and maybe this is a question for city manager, and just to kind of know with my colleagues too what next steps would be. I think as Chief Brown mentioned, more people equals more calls, and as we talk about some transformational projects downtown and having potentially thousands more people coming to visit our downtown area weekly even, that I think lends itself to probably having more calls warranted. And so just kind of planting those seeds, I think, in my own mind, and trying to figure out what that will look like moving forward, especially in light of, historically having far higher numbers of sworn officers out and about, proactively being able to patrol and build relationships within the community. So kind of a question and a comment, I guess, but just wanted to mention that that's sort of where my mind's at, looking forward this next year, but then beyond as well.
One of the things, Commissioner, that we've had a lot of internal discussions on is because, I don't know, many of you know Lieutenant Pat Dean, who's our special events lieutenant, will be retiring in the next year or so. And as we're transitioning, we're making sure that we don't lose that institutional knowledge, and been taking a real hard look at the soccer stadium, at the amphitheater, and how that's going to impact us, because there are a lot of calls for, even non-emergency, but just a lot of calls for police service surrounding events at the Van Andel, at DeVos Place as it is. So we're kind of modeling out, even without an increase in population, just with an increase of those events, what our staffing would need to look like. And right now, we're addressing that with overtime of officers, but that's something that we're taking a hard look at, so that when we do hit that 304, we can talk about it and say, is this the right number, is higher? And I assume we'll be having the conversation here with you.
And I was
just going to say, I appreciate the context. I think the last thing I want is for us as a city to be the bottleneck in terms of what we're allowed to hire in terms of volume. So that's just kind of where the nature behind my question and comment. So, City Manager?
Yep, I think both for police and fire, we've been talking about the impact of some of the projects and more activity on the river corridor in terms of water rescue, as well as more dense, taller buildings, technical rescue, but particularly for police, the 304 number is not the ceiling. The chief is authorized to, or can be authorized to hire at least 10 more above his current staffing levels. And I think when we start to see we can consistently maintain a staffing level that's greater than 304, we'll be coming back to this body asking to reevaluate the resources in the police department.
Great, thank you.
All right, other questions, Commissioner?
Good morning. Thank you so much. Great morning so far. Chief, I appreciate your words around our task to co-produce public safety. I think this body, everybody at this table who's talking this morning are part of that, as well as folks in communities, CBOs, and everyday residents. So I'm excited about the strides that we're making to do just that. I've shared last week, and I'll just say again, we as a city and a community need a comprehensive approach to public safety, right? And we're all part of that, where we can prevent crime and violence, we can respond appropriately, and then we can restore after the fact. And so I appreciate your inclusion of the return of community police officers and doing that really in response to what you're hearing from community, I think, since you started 25 months ago. Can you talk a little bit more about your model and approach around community policing and exactly what community can expect once that rolls out?
Sure. And I'd first like to address, we'll be the first to acknowledge there's so many more parts to the public safety puzzle, and I should probably give a shout out to Hyundai, who, as you all know, with the Kia and Hyundai theft, we communicated with them, and they have a tent right now set up outside, I think it's 555 Monroe, where they're going to be here today and tomorrow. They were here yesterday, doing free security upgrades, handing out free wheel locks, and it's one of those things that we'll acknowledge that when we are apprehend an 11-year-old in a stolen car, I'm not the right person to solve that problem. I got the car back and I got the 11-year-old, but what do we do with the 11-year-old? So, hey, if we can stop crime before it even happens, or take away that attractive nuisance created by a TikTok craze, that's a better way to co-produce. And I see Mr. Brown's in the audience, at least he was, and even when things like cure violence, if my role is simply to stand next to him and say, I support cure violence, then I'm going to do that as far as co-producing public safety. Our vision for community policing officers. So there was designated officers here prior to my time here, and it was they had been cut. I don't know if it was budget cuts, whatever, how they ended, but there was probably 20 or 30 throughout the city, and their role was just to do community events, do a lot of interactions with businesses and community activity, but there was internally some resentment of those officers that they weren't responding to 911 calls. They didn't, they had more flexible schedules, and it kind of became an us versus them culture in the police department, where they were less respected than they should be, although in the communities they were loved. And I think they were doing a good job. But so we want to move the model more to an officer that is still available for those emergency 911 calls, not tied to the radio, has a dedicated amount of their day, say 70% or more, to focus on proactive, doing the positive community engagement type of things, reacting to community complaints, interacting with our detectives when there's a victim that needs follow-up in their neighborhood. So, however, still having the ability to be a true police officer, where if there's a call on the radio of officer needs assistance or a crime in progress, they will still respond. So it's going to be a little different than it was last time, where those were seen more as desk jobs. And this is going to be the officer on the street, in the community, being responsive, having time away so they're not, quote, tied to the radio. They have the ability to spend the time that they need. So that's a high-level look at what the model is going to be. And Deputy Chief Trigg, who was himself a community police officer under the old model, is spearheading this. We have sat down and discussed what staffing numbers we need to get to do it, and we're confident that in that number 304, as we get closer to that, we'll start assigning at first one officer per every service area, and get it back off the ground again. It is one of the things that I've heard quite a bit since I've been here, where our community officers, we want the community officers back.
Thank you for that. I'll also say, as part of this co-production of public safety, and I think whereas part of our work and other institutions is really addressing those root causes. Someone said it earlier. Housing is part of that. Food insecurity, employment, education, health. Like all of these make a safe or unsafe ecosystem and create the conditions in which people can thrive and be safe. So I thank you for being part of that. And to that end, someone mentioned domestic violence as a huge and growing problem. I know that was a significant number of homicides over the last year or so. And the uptick in juvenile crime is a huge concern both in the city and throughout the county. I think we have an opportunity to do more in that area of providing support for youth services, youth families, in partnership with other institutions. And so as we think about a holistic public safety strategy, I see those two areas as being kind of areas where we can put a little bit more effort in and a little bit more dollars. So I'm happy to see and support bringing on more victim services support sooner rather than later, and hope that we can find ways to flex into the youth and family services and support piece as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, any other questions for Chief Winstrom? All right, seeing none, thank you, Chief. I know I've said it before, appreciate you and your leadership and all the great work that you're doing in our city.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks. Next up, we'll turn to Mr. Brandon Davis, Director of our OPA. I think I'll start. I don't have a question for Mr. Davis, I just have a comment. I want to say how much I appreciate your leadership when we created OPA. I think many of us around this table, when that department was started, we had ideas on what we wanted to see out of that department, and we put it on your shoulders to create it and operationalize it and put it into action. And I can tell you how pleased I am with your leadership. I look at some of these programs and the lives that you're impacting, and it just brings me a lot of joy that I was a part of creating this department and supporting your department. Also want to publicly give a shout out to Bloomberg. They have been a huge support for me as mayor, and I know that they have supported us with a number of fellows over the years, and I just want to say how much I appreciate the work that they're doing throughout our country to support mayors and cities, particularly around issues related to justice. So thank you. Commissioners, questions for Mr. Davis? Or comments? Commissioner Knight?
Thank you for your work on this. I think one of my questions was the grants that you have been applied for to continue to support cure violence. Do you know how much those grants are?
Yes, Commissioner. We've applied for 2 grants now. Each of those grants is $500,000. So one is congressionally directed spending and another is community program funding.
Okay. And then one of the other questions I had was about the I Am a Dream event that you do, and just wondering why that's not, or you're not partnered with Our Community's Children, since they do a lot of the youth-related events and programs throughout the city, and how come it's not coupled with that to help maybe support that program a little bit better? And then just wondering what the numbers look like in supporting the work moving into the first ward and second ward. $50,000 seems like a real low amount to move into a whole other ward when the budget is actually, well, at least what it says here, they spent $330,000 last year. So what other things are we doing to support that work to move into the second ward? If we're moving fully into the second ward or just sticking to the area right now, which looked like it cut off at Michigan Street, I think.
Sure. Okay, thank you for the question. So to the first question around OCC, OPA did work with OCC in the creation of the I Am the Dream program. So when we had the idea and we began to formulate with community stakeholders, OCC was a part of that. The work that we do is really around civic engagement. So it's a slightly different space than what OCC does, but they are available and have been supportive in the way that we've rolled this program out. As it relates to the spending for Cure Violence, the $330,000 number we're talking about was the city's allocation for Cure Violence, which is different than the overall cost of Cure Violence. So the overall cost for Cure Violence for just the third ward is right around $745,000 annually. When we talk about the expansion, our amazing partners, and Mr. Brown is here at the Urban League, have really worked with us. They do the majority of the fundraising for Cure Violence. They also are the ones who are doing the day-to-day implementation of Cure Violence. The expansion was just around $300,000 additional to go to the other wards, and that's because the infrastructure was already there. So the supervisory staff and things of that nature were already in place. They were expanding by hiring additional staff to do the work in the other places. So that's how we got somewhat of a cost savings in the other wards. As I indicated earlier, we can't speak to the success in the first and second ward yet, but we can speak to the success in the third ward, and it has been successful, and there has been a reduction.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, other questions? Commissioner? Oh, Commissioner Goulet, and then Commissioner Isaki.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Davis, thank you for your report and for the work that you're doing. I have a couple of questions. One, I'm appreciative of your work with immigrants and refugees, but then I also saw you only have 3 staff persons. And so are you working with other organizations in the community that are focusing on working with this demographic, or do you have someone on your staff that has those experiences of being an immigrant or a refugee to help guide you or your office in this particular work?
Great question, Commissioner. We're fortunate to have, I'm fortunate to have an amazing team. Let me just say that. OPA is a small but mighty team, and we have people with some amazing experiences. Albert Gasaki is an immigrant to this country. He was a Rwandan refugee, and he also was an attorney in Rwanda before coming here. So he has the lived experience and also the professional experience that really helps us to navigate that space well. We also have partnerships with organizations all across Grand Rapids and actually extended into Kent County to really work in those spaces.
Great, that's good news. Thank you. Also, I'm really appreciative of your efforts into the expungement program. I was attending an event this past Sunday afternoon at the Link Center, and they were talking about second chances and housing for all. I guess, are there other organizations that help you beyond your office, or other organizations that do this kind of work in our community? Do you know?
Yes, Commissioner. There are lots of organizations who work in this space. So one of the things that we learned from being in this space, and let me go back. Before OPA started hosting events, we helped at events. That was the first part of the model. So we went to events and tried to increase their capacity to provide expungements. What we saw is that there was a continued need for ongoing support in this space. So we created our own event. After creating that event, we saw that that event was not enough. So we expanded to year-round wraparound support. But there are other individuals who are also doing this work, and we partner together to get the work done. I give a shout out to Kamal Sandiford, who's a attorney who is the expungement guru in Grand Rapids. If there's an expungement event, he's probably there. And he also supports OPA's events and is there to help us in that way. Attorneys from the Legal Aid Office come and support, as well as from our Indigent Defense Commission. Obviously, the court is a partner in that space as well. So there are a lot of community groups. The Black and Brown Cannabis Guild was one of the first organizations to begin to do expungements in that space, and Denavia Mojay was one of those individuals really championing that work. So there are community partners that we work with.
After attending that rally, I was even more supportive of this work, because we heard a story of a young lady who had an experience with the courts and was pregnant when she was incarcerated, and then when she came out, she couldn't get a housing because of the record, and this young lady is now 2 degrees farther down the road with her college degrees, and she's finally just been able to get housing. Now, I don't know if her record was expunged or not, but I think your work is very important in that area, so thank you for that effort.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'll share, again, shouting out my staff. Faith, who works in our office, really is a paralegal who came to our staff on a temporary basis, still working on a temporary basis. But she meets with individuals every single day, and I often walk past her office and see not only the individual who's eligible for the expungement crying, but she's crying with them, excited about this new space in life. She also goes to court with them and walks through those stages with them. We wouldn't be able to do this work without her and the other individuals who are really supportive.
May I make just one comment then after that? I know Representative Grant was at that meeting, and she was the sponsor of a bill, HB 4878, that is working towards giving access to housing for individuals with a criminal record. So I hope that we can be supportive of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Davis. And I think it's it's great to see the number of participants who were involved in that Know Your Rights campaign, and just trying to talk through what does that process looks like. I think I was telling the chief and deputy chief after our last commission meeting about how I got pulled over, or how I got detained at 18. For real.
Try to get me
accused of a crime, and how frightening it was, and ultimately had the resources to resolve myself out of that situation. But if I hadn't, it would have been a story of probably what was shared by just Commissioner Goey. So just the work is important, and recognizing that. So I want to say thank you for that. I had a question too about the expungement pieces. Again, just thinking about the big lifts that these events are, and how are these things, how do we continue to operationalize them, or utilizing technology? I mean, I know a lot of it is, and many thanks to the number of volunteers who really dedicate their time. I know a number of people who were there last year and were able to get that resolution. But my question was on cure violence as it related to the Second Ward bilingual support. And I was just curious, I was kind of chatting here next to Commissioner Robbins. I was thinking that would probably be we'd see more of that in that First Ward cutout. But just wanted to, that was my assumption, but wanted to hear, is it really kind of both, or am I wrong in that? What does that look like?
I think it's both. I know there was specific requests in the Second Ward, which is why it's listed that way. But one of the great things about the Urban League being an all-encompassing organization is that where the need is, they would send that individual to support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Commissioners, any other questions for Mr. Davis? All right, seeing none, we will turn to the court. And I don't have a question, but I am going to make a few comments. So first, Mr. Fisher, and I'm sure my colleagues are well aware of the constitutional requirements of our courts. So I want to be very clear. I value our court system, particularly our specialty courts. I think they do incredible work in our community. What I take issue with is the funding mechanism, and the fact that this body, is required to continue to fund the court with very little impact or say because of the state mandate. I personally think that there should be a more equitable funding mechanism at the state level to support courts throughout our entire state, because courts in urban areas, as you referenced many of them, we all are running a deficit, and other courts are not. So I want to be really clear on record that I support the work. But the reality is, I've been around this table, and as the general fund subsidy of the court continues to grow, unfortunately, it does impact other departments, whether we like it or not. General fund, we only have so much money to support priorities, whether that is youth services or housing or homelessness or parks or victim services. The list goes on and on. We all have priorities around this table. We all want to put more money into prevention. We want to prevent people from ever having to get into the court system. Our ability to fund those things, it may not be today, but if you look at our 5-year projection, at some point, not while I'm mayor, at some point, this body is going to have to make hard decisions about how those general fund dollars are used. And right now, we don't have a say. We had this conversation, I feel like it's deja vu. We've had this conversation around this table. A couple years ago, we asked the question, when we were making those tough decisions during COVID, and we said, what recourse do we have with this general fund support of the court? And we were told we have none. And that's what I take exception with. So I served on multiple committees. I worked with the county. We came up with recommendations at the state level. Surely I know that people at the state care deeply and they are looking at this, but nothing has been done yet. And so this body is going to continue to have to make those hard decisions, not just today, but for years to come as we look at this, in my opinion, broken funding system that is a state mandate that is unfunded. So again, I want to be very clear. Our court does amazing work in this community. But you look at the numbers of people impacted and served by the court, it continues to go down. I think that is also a testament to the great work we're doing in our community. And then you look at our other priorities and the number of people impacted by those priorities. I would love to have $2 million more to put into cure violence or youth services or our homelessness initiative. But again, those decisions are going to be tougher and tougher for those of you who are going to be here 3, 4, 5 years from now. And you look at all of the ARPA funds are going to be gone. We're going to plateau on some of our revenues. Our costs are going to continue to go up because much of that is in personnel and our benefits are going to continue to go up. All of that is going to continue to grow. And so again, year over year, we sit here and we have to make this decision and we continue to not have a solution. And I am concerned about that for our city and the future of our city financial mechanism to be able to fund all of these other important services. So that's my caution. That's my concern. I want to be very clear, Mr. Fisher. I appreciate you, the work that you do, our judges, our court system. I am very concerned about the inability for us to have a more equitable funding source from the state to support this work. And year over year, we are being told this is the subsidy and you have no control, no say how those funds are spent. That's my issue. So I just want to be very clear because I think sometimes people can take a comment I making it, my comment about parks clearly touched a nerve with you, and that wasn't my intent. So thank you. All right. Others who have questions or comments? Commissioner?
Thanks, Mayor. I remember, I think it was my first budget where we were doing it, via Zoom, and this was the question that came up, and this was before Miss Todd was the administrator. I know she wasn't able to be here today, and I think this is. I think the presentation was well laid out, so it's very clear about what are the realities. And then, Mayor, I know that was the frustration that we had back in 2020, and it continues. And so I guess as somebody who's going to be here for the next 4 years, I would say would remain. I think this is obviously something that Ms. Farrick had talked about. It is something that I think we'll see through this next legislation process. We have some other things that have come from the state level. You talked about some of the mandates that we had, which are good things to happen, but with some of the registration. So there's often this back and forth that we need to engage in. So I'm definitely committed to how we can work on this at the state level. I think you're right. agree with you, Commissioner Purdue, about the youth services. We didn't talk quite enough about our SAFE funding, but that has been work that has been done. DC Trig has been a part of that, which has been led by outside organizations with some connection points by the city. But I would love to see more of our general fund go to those priorities that we shared that are listed, and how do we co-create this solution. So I'll just say, found out last week I'm gonna be here for 4 years, and so let's work together to find the solution. I think we have a very open ear of our legislators, and I absolutely agree. Like the court system, somebody important to me just went through a process, and the process was a little bit longer. They got some information that they were supposed to be somewhere. They waited for 4 hours. They were supposed to be somewhere else, and Ms. Todd took care of that. But I do think, like, what are those efficiencies and pieces that we can continue to pull out to say, some of those manual aspects of doing some of that work. And so I just offer that as a suggestion, like up here, it's never like this one thing happened, but I think as commissioners, we have our experiences that we hear from constituents about their experiences. If it's the police department, it's the fire department, if it's our court system. And I do thank Ms. Todd for jumping on that, quite quickly. I just think, like, that person, if they didn't have a job that allowed them to be able to be on a Zoom call for 4 hours, what happens? And so how do we continue to refine some of those operational experiences for our constituents as well? So, I don't know. I think it's tough, and we have to make some tough decisions around this table. So thank you.
Thanks. Commissioner Evans?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Likewise to my colleague here, I'm someone who will be at this table for the next couple of years, and hopefully more to come after that. So I do want to be clear that I don't think our criticism comes from a place of unappreciativeness or feeling like the money is necessarily going to waste. And I appreciate the mutual agreement too that the funding behind 61st District Court is an improvement that has to be made at a jurisdiction higher than ours. But still, I just wanted to add my concern, I think, too, when I see the increase and, already on top of a large lump sum of money going to the organization each year, and talking about many other initiatives that are grassroots led and community owned. I think that's something that I'm trying to figure out how we can better give them resources over time to support the work that they're doing too. So I guess I'll have to do some more research myself as to what influence or say, I guess, as a city body we can have over that subsidy, because it does seem kind of interesting to me that we just kind of get footed a bill and are expected to pay it each year without having any sort of influence or say over or even input, I guess, as to what that money could be going towards. So that's kind of where my question came from previously too as well. It doesn't seem like the statute at the state level is very clear as to what specifically we have to fund. It's just general operations. So I think, to me, that seems like there's some wiggle room as to like what we determine to be operations versus, extra value add things that maybe aren't necessities. So I guess I would also be curious to see over time too what, as the costs have increased, whether that's specific to personnel or programs or having to add headcount to support grant funding for certain programs, seeing what that's looked like over time, and if there's been additional costs incurred to add different programming under the courts that maybe we could push pause on for a time being to save money. That's kind of where my mind is going. So would be curious if there's any information you could present regarding that. So thank you.
All right. Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioners? Commissioner Knight?
Just to add a little bit more to what my colleague said, I remember a day when there was no assistance like eviction court or domestic violence court. I remember a day when none of those things existed, and me being a person living in this community had to deal with a number of those issues personally. Right. And so we have come a long way as a community in the work that we're doing. But I also think that, I feel like we're a little bit of that turnip, and we're trying to squeeze that thing right now. But I think we also have to think about the creativity, right? And we always talk about certain groups that we may know of that we're partnering with, but I would even say if we step back and begin to work with some of the larger nonprofits that engage some of the, even more of the smaller nonprofits that we're not working with. A lot of times we'll connect with this person because we heard of that person, or that we work with this person in the community. And so we continue to work with those people, not thinking or knowing that there are even more people out in the community that we can connect with to do some of these services, to pass some of these things off, like that youth program that you're doing in OPA. What other organizations are doing this? You have Realty is Royalism in the community, and you have women growing, or girls growing into women. We have so many more organizations, I think, in this community that we can tap into to begin to partner with, to see how we can share those resources, and them being able to apply for grants at the Community Foundation or United Way, and be able to beef up the work that they're doing in the community to really help undergird and support, because sometimes I think we forget that they are the tentacles that reach even deeper in the community where we can't. Right? And so really being creative and stepping back and looking at more solutions and how we can partner better with people that can carry some of that load, so that we can make sure that the really important things, all of it's important, but these services that we need, so that people's lives can be protected, and that we have people in the community walking and talking to our neighbors and building up those relationships. And we know that these women can be supported in our court system that are dealing with domestic violence. We know that those numbers rose during the pandemic, but the work that was being done in the courts, it didn't match up. And so what did we do? We had to rely on other nonprofits in the community that actually started doing that work to provide those resources to these people. And so, it's a both and in all that we're doing. And I know that we don't have it all, and we'll never have it all. That's like being at home with 11 kids and deciding if you're going to have cable or not. Break out the coloring crayons, right? We can figure it out. It's going to be difficult, but I think we have some more creativity that we can tap into, I think, that we haven't. And I look forward to being able to dig into some of that and helping pull out some of these organizations that are really trying to do good work, and they might be small, but these are the ones that could be standing on top of the mountain in 2 years doing a lot of this extra work for us and with us.
Yeah. Thanks, Commissioner. All right, Commissioner Perdue.
Thank you. I share the concerns around what growing costs will mean across the board, not just for 61st, but we talked about fire, we talked about PD, we have a lot of capital projects coming up. So looking at 4 or 5 years from now, what will that mean for hard decisions we have to make about our priorities and where we invest? I am curious, Ms. Ferrick, from the legislative side, so I see that the kind of there's the sunset date has been extended by about 2.5 years. Do you have a sense of how much this issue is a priority at the state level? Can we expect to see significant movement before December 2026? What can you tell us about this?
I think this is a difficult year because it is an election year, and right now they're really focused on getting the budget done. There was some movement in trying to develop another commission to reexamine what needs to be done. And I think there was real disagreement about the fact that we already have real recommendations on the table that can be moved forward and should be moved forward. So at this point in time, I think the pieces are all there. We just need to get them to act on it. But it is as it is a large problem for the city of Grand Rapids, it's about a $500 million problem for the state. And so it's significant in terms of them taking this issue on. And one of the biggest pieces of that is making the court employees state of Michigan employees. And so that whole funding mechanism piece does need to be solved, but we do have a roadmap for that, recommendation, specific legislation that needs to be introduced and passed. So,
thank you. And then, Mr. Fisher, so I know we've seen the budget numbers, proposed budget numbers last week. I can't do math really quickly or from slide 45. What is, can you remind me what the total budget is for fiscal year 25 for 61st District?
Absolutely. So looking at those slides, our expenditure budget is $13,685,789, and our revenue request is $13,284,932.
And then how many people did you say the court see a year? Did I hear 100,000?
I'm sorry?
How many people did you say the court sees a year?
At least 100,000.
Okay. So as we've gone through these different sections of public safety, we have fire at 44 mil, PD at 64 mil, OPA at 2.7, 61st at 13 million. And I think we are short-sighted I think we acknowledge this funding challenge, and I think we are short-sighted if we don't recognize the work of 61st District Court as square in the middle of a lot of our public safety strategy. And if you look at price tag, 13 million versus 110 for fire and PD, though they are different focus areas, it's very, very important. When we talk about decreasing recidivism, when we talk about catching people and helping to integrate them back into community in a really safe and effective and successful way that impacts the fabric of an entire community, the work that you all are doing and the work that we are supporting is really, really important. I think particularly without the problem-solving courts, I think it will be a huge missed opportunity for our community. So I want to make the point that I share my colleagues' concerns around long-term funding. Well, I'm curious to see how fast this can move at the state level. And I think we need to look a little bit more holistically and broadly about how important these services are as part of our public safety strategies. We can't say we prioritize public safety without talking about the critical services and the work that this court provides. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions or comments? All right. We'll go ahead and close this discussion down, and I'll turn to my city manager. Do you want to take a 2-minute break or keep on going?
I want to do I'd like to do a couple things for Audible. I think if we can do both governmental excellence and engaging connected back to back, then ask questions and we'll come back with economic prosperity and affordability. Then also need to know who has a hard stop this morning and what time is that?
I have 2, 3.
Noon, ideally.
Noon.
Noon.
We have 2. We'll lose 2 at noon. What is that? 12:30. Easier for the ride. This is the last session.
Why don't we go ahead and move on? So thank you all. Appreciate your updates. Why don't we keep going then? Go at it. Commissioners, if you need a break, please take a break. Let's go ahead and move on. Let's see what we can get through in 30 minutes.
Okay.
And then we may need to take a section and add that onto our
Next.
budget session next week.
Okay. So again,
Does that sound good, Commissioners? Good?
governmental excellence and all the supporting staff on Connected and Engaged. Let's get through both of those sections and then we'll pause for questions.
All right.
Thank you, Commissioners. Thank you, Mayor. So when we talk about governmental excellence, there's a couple of areas that we really wanted to focus in on. One of those has been a big conversation throughout the course of this year, and that's just revisiting a slide that we presented at the initial budget presentation in regards to customer service. Again, it's worth noting that the investments that we were able to make last year have had a positive impact both on the hiring and the retention of our 311 customer service staff. And they continue to look at process improvements as well as technological improvements that might be able to improve their level of service. So we expect that reduction in wait times to continue through the coming year. They've brought that down over the last 8 months from 7 minutes to 1. But we're also looking at how technology can continue to enable us in this space. There's been a lot of conversation about AI-powered chat and what role that might play. There's been a lot of discussion amongst governments about what are the ethics, responsibilities, and regulations that we need to be mindful of in employing that space, but it is something that we're going to be looking at this year. So the next thing that I wanted to center around, and we have a lot of conversations about this inside the organization, but I don't know that we've had a conversation about it with the elected body. And that's when we adopted the strategic plan. We, of course, adopted a set of values as well. And what we've been doing over the last few years is building our capacity to really distribute those values throughout the organization. The idea there being that rather than having a single center for an organizational value, that we really need to be spreading that out throughout the organization if we want to see cultural change. So each one of these areas, we have a department or departments or individuals that are leading that work, but that doesn't mean that they're the one that's doing all the work. What they're doing in some cases is leading by example. In other cases, they're working alongside departments. And in other cases, they're providing training and tools in order to enable employees to embody those values themselves in their day-to-day work. And that starts from the moment that they come in the door. It's one of the things that we talk about at every employee orientation. So just reinforcing that, again, from a ground-up perspective, we've had this group really kind of come together organically, and it's our values collaborative. And these are the individuals that are out there planning and doing the training and development work every day within each one of our values areas. And I've been really impressed with, first of all, the way that they've come together, but also the way that they choose to collaborate. So they come together, they talk about what's on their horizon, what are their challenges, what are the projects that they've got on their plate, and they not only provide advice to one another, but they actually quite often will participate in the respective activities for whomever it is that's the lead, whether it's equity training and development, whether it's our employee resource groups, whether it's a particular innovation project that's going on, wellness programs, they'll actually back up and help staff those things as well. So today we wanted to talk specifically about the innovation and continuous improvement investments that we've made over the last 2 years. Looking at how they were formed, or how the function was formed, really it was to empower the organization to be able to do this work on a day-to-day basis. We hired a single individual to help lead that work, and their responsibility is to partner with teams throughout the organization to help them think through those wicked challenges and wicked problems that they have from an operational perspective. And that might be, how do we better serve our internal customers? It might be, how will we serve our external customers? If we look at the numbers over those first 2 years, we've had 425 staff members that have participated either through training, through work groups, through project teams. We've had 15 departmental teams over those 2 years that have participated in projects. And the net impact has been about $700,000 to the organization. Some of that is actual direct savings. Some of that is cost avoidance versus going out and hiring external consultants to do some of this work. So talking about the internal piece of this, these are a couple of the key projects that have been stood up. One of those is the Innovation Underground. One of the things that's really compelling about the Innovation Underground is that it's not just our staff members who participate. It's open to any employee that wants to participate. But we also have external partners that come in. One of those external partners is Dematic. They have a pretty well-oiled, lean program that they run. So they actually have employees that participate in those discussions as well when we bring the team together. We've had the opportunity to bring in people like Mike Rother. Mike Rother is the man who effectively wrote the book on lean, literally wrote the book. You can buy it on Amazon. So we're bringing in external partners to provide private sector input and feedback on how we might better do our jobs. The Innovation Book Club gives individual employees the opportunity to do deeper dives on specific subjects, specific areas that they can get together and then talk about how could we apply these in our day-to-day work. And then the Alliance for Innovation, it's one of my favorite conferences because it's not based on your job title. Cities put teams together that are working in the innovation space, and they take that team to the conference to present, learn, interact with other teams across the nation that are doing similar work. I won't spend understanding that we're limited on time, too much time on this particular slide, but this really outlines the way that we think about innovation inside the organization, and that it is a continuous cycle of discovery, iteration, experimentation, and then evaluation so that we can then refine those processes over time. The next three slides, you'll see a number of the projects that the office has been involved with over the last 2 years. That includes internal activities like working with the fleet department. They had a challenge with their invoicing systems, and they were actually having difficulty getting bills processed, which was resulting in them effectively getting on the naughty list with vendors and then having to resolve that in order to continue to do business. And our innovation lead sat down with them, did some process mapping, created some improvements. It was a multi-level team from leadership down to the folks that were doing the work to make improvements that have benefited the fleet department. And then we have customer service facing ones like our development center work. It's something that we talked about over this last year. That started with a lunch and learn where we actually brought in people who put in applications to the development center and had a conversation with them about what were their challenges, what were the processes where they saw there would be opportunities for improvement. And we're going to talk about that one a little bit here in a second. Moving through, the other one that I want to talk about is the Development Center Customer Service Workshop. So that was bringing together the entire staff of the Development Center to talk about their respective roles in the processing of work and applications in order to, again, take the information that was given to them in the lunch and learn and then talk about how do we operationalize that. And at this point, I'd actually like to introduce Jennifer Van Horsen. She's our innovation lead, and have her walk you through that process so that you have a little bit better understanding of how that works.
So just to provide a story example from the Development Center, basically it was the Development Center team itself that reached out seeking some support on a project that they wanted to work on, really around the permit process. You can see through the slide, basically the team got together and looked at basically mapping first. What is that process? Sort of visualizing it, getting it down on paper, and sort of showing it from both the perspective of the people doing the work as well as the customer experiencing that process. So there were two different streams in that map. The next thing the staff did in that team was went through a process of conducting interviews among their own department staff about what it's like to do the work, what challenges they're encountering, and then received feedback that Doug already mentioned in the lunch and learn from customers who process things through the permitting process. That generated some options. The team came up with kind of a portfolio of different things that related from day-to-day work, ensuring people had quiet time and space to get things done, to some ideas around the outward-facing process. They created a PDF of the application questions, different things that were brought up during the lunch and learn. And then this led eventually to that department-wide request for hosting all of the staff together in sort of a miniature retreat, which surprisingly, that was the first time the entire Development Center staff had come together since, I believe, 2015. So it was a really great opportunity for people to meet one another, to gain some rapport, build some relationships, and also start talking about the different pieces across the process and how they all work together collaboratively to get their work done. This is just another slide highlighting that lunch and learn. One of the really great comments from the day, one of the participants said, "My company works with several cities. I've worked with cities throughout my career. This is the first time a city has asked me to be part of something like this. This is great, and I really appreciate the team and being asked. And so we had a really good dialogue with participants during that session, and you can see there was identified one quick activity where they basically said it's hard to complete the application because you don't see it all the things ahead of time, and they've got staff who need to look up different parts of the application. So that PDF was quickly made and distributed. Another area that you'll see circled is really around the review process, and that's part of the conversations that took place in the retreat.
So as we're looking forward, we actually just had our first session with our executives on the Foresight Leadership Series. That's really building capacity with our leaders in terms of anticipatory leadership, how they can kind of separate themselves from the day-to-day to be able to look across multiple horizons and how they make decisions, how they plan their work. We're going to continue supporting and designing facilitation for our top management retreats. We have a new book club that's going to be launching. I just want to give a shout out. That's Jennifer Palka's book. If you have an opportunity to read it, it's fantastic. She was the founder of Code for America, and has a lot to say about the things that we can improve in both local and federal government. They already have several departments that have requested support in this coming year. That includes communications, legal, and fleet. And we're going to be carrying forward the sustainability challenge with our employees with action teams centered around several different areas where we feel like we can make an impact at the staff level. Moving on, one of the other questions that we had was in regards to our third-party administration contract on healthcare. I did work with the team to find out exactly where we are. Of course, we only have 1 quarter of results at this point, but if we project that forward across the year, we are trending in a positive direction. You'll see here that we're projecting savings across medical claims, similarly across pharmacy claims. And then if you look at the total spend, we're trending about $3.1 million below where we were last year. Then the last thing that I wanted to note, because there was a question about premiums. As I mentioned in the commission meeting, the actuaries like to see a full year of performance before they start recommending adjustments to our premiums. We do our sign up for healthcare in the fall. We won't have a full year of premium or full year of performance information, of course, until the end of the calendar year. So we're going to see how we can continue to work with that. That's been something that we've been actively working on over the last 5 years, as you'll see reflected in the rates. If you look back over the last 5 years, our single and our double rates have actually gone down relative to 2019 at a time when health insurance has trended up 4 to 6% annually. And if you look at our family coverage, it's only gone up a little less than 3% since 2019. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Ms. Claren, who's going to talk about the next few slides.
Okay, we'll start out with the facilities master plan. As you know, we started the project back in winter of 2022. Phases have included scoping, facilities condition assessment, space needs, and then we've gotten to the master planning over the past few months. We do have a draft report that's being reviewed right now by our project team and, of course, our engineering department. From there, it'll get turned over to our executive staff as well as eventually the top management group for reactions or feedback. And we expect to, brief the commission on this by late fall. But in those things, you'll hear feedback on how are we utilizing our buildings and what should we be doing with them. So really looking forward to seeing the outcomes of that. Moving on to discuss grant management, or did I skip one? Oh, My slides are, no worries.
Trying to quarterback.
No worries. I think my slides are out of order a little bit, but that's okay. For the grants management piece, I have with me to my left Stevie Purcell. Some of you might have met her. When we wanted to step more into the grants management space, especially with receiving the $92.3 million ARPA grant a few years ago, we hired Guidehouse as our consultant to help us manage that. It was a huge lift for the city, so we got outside help. The idea around that is Guidehouse also, kind of the model they did in Detroit is they're helping Detroit stand up a grants management in-house. Stevie is our first step into that foray of just centralizing, how do we do this? Knowing at any given point in time, I can answer the question, if city manager wants to know, what are we applying for? What are we considering? What awards have we received? Stevie's helping us answer that question. So she's done tremendous work already. Just to report to you, we have received $60 million in grants awarded over the past 12 months, 81.5 million grant applications just since November of 2023, and we have November of 2023 on here that's because that's when Stevie started. So just our progress over the past few months has been tremendous. And then in progress right now, we have about 2.4 million applications in progress, but I would suspect that's an older number because that was from probably a couple of weeks ago and she's been busy. So as far as our future outlook with what we're doing with grants management, in my office, I do expect to free up at least a half of an FTE. I have a project manager right now for the city side of the ERP that should get freed up and be able to step in this space as well, because what we've found is we don't have this know-how at the department level. So Stevie's spending significant time helping outside of the community development that has these large, annual grant processes they have the functional knowledge to do it on their own. Some of our smaller departments need help with the lift of doing the application, as well as Stevie's stepping into the compliance side, teaching departments how to do compliance work on all these grants. So with our city, the ERP, we have been working on the ERP for nearly a year, and ERP is basically our citywide software that manages all kinds of different modules. It's our HR functionality, it's procure to pay, it's our general accounting, a variety of functions. I think supply chain things, I think of, the capital management, all that kind of stuff. To replace our current system, CGI's A360. So through the RFP process, we have been working with High Street as our vendor and Oracle Fusion as our new software. We're looking forward to being able to do self-service payroll and having more learning functionality available for employees. Our HR functionality, all consolidated into one system. Right now, there's a couple different sources we go to for different HR needs, but having everything as one-stop shop is going to be tremendous for them. The biggest thing with our current ERP is, can we get at the data? And that is sometimes hard to do, where I often have to tell a lot of you, hey, can you pull this really quick? And I'm like, give me a day or two, I'll get back to you. Just the reporting side of our current system is lacking. So we're looking forward to more data accessibility and what we can do with that data, more performance management opportunities with that, and then automation of what we do manually with workarounds. So we have had some project disruption. Our vendor had significant turnover of key staff on their functional side, so that's caused some issues, but we are getting back on our feet now with, some redesign and carryover. The handoffs weren't the best when we lost some of our functional leads on the other side, but we are correcting for that now, where High Street has brought in extra resources to help us make our go live. So our previous go live, last time I talked to you, was July 1st. That's now we're working to either do an October 2024 go live or hold off to January of 25. So I hope to report on that to you in the coming months.
I just want to remind the team that we're going to lose 2 commissioners in 10 minutes.
So yeah, anyway, moving on to grant management. I had this previously up with my previous slides, so I'm not sure how we got jumbled in our slides, but this gives you a flavor for current opportunities where, Stevie's helping us go after. So we have the Inflation Reduction Act, and these are, just for a flavor of the climate pollution reduction grants, solar for all grant opportunities. We're evaluating 2 other opportunities you can see on this slide. I'll move on to the bipartisan infrastructure law, where you can see we've been awarded some, informally they're called BRIC grants. We have applications out there for $2.8 million for a couple different opportunities, and then we have 2 more opportunities that we're currently evaluating. And then moving on for other opportunities, obviously we have our hands in a lot of different spaces, but about $3.3 million in other opportunities. This includes, for example, working right now on an EDA grant for the purchase of a burn building to be associated with a new training center for fire. So we're trying to make sure we're augmenting current projects if we can, or helping with the lift of funding the Corps. And then other opportunities we've submitted, $44.2 million. This is just, previous was applications. These are ones that are currently submitted. You'll see the 2 WEGI Foundation on the right-hand column at the top. I just got informed by Allison Sutter, and we put awarded in there that we have found out yesterday that we did get those 2 awards. So excited about having that support. And then as far as our upcoming debt issuance, I talked to you a lot about this at mid-year. We are pricing the Scribner debt and the $20 million on behalf of the DDA for the amphitheater. That pricing is actually, I believe, May 9th, and then we'll close a month later, June 11th, so those proceeds will be available for those projects. Total, I believe I talked about most of these opportunities before, but our total estimated debt we're going to issue is $133.5 million on our general obligation debt. We do have some other issuances on this list, including a water refunding. We're still determining the sizing there. And then, of course, the DWRF, which is that big initiative we're doing. We talk about in the manager's letter on that opportunity through the state to do this low-cost loan. It's only a 2%, but we get really good principal forgiveness on it, so it's a great opportunity. We're going to issue around $33.5 million related to that. And of course, those 2 are secured by the Water Supply Systems Fund. And finally, as horizon issues for governmental excellence, we do have bargaining coming up. We'll start that, and we'll start planning for that in the coming year. And of course, there's the compensation and classification study that HR is currently working on. So that would be it.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Claren, our CFO. Knowing that some of you are on a tight timetable, I'm going to turn to you for questions or comments, those of you who have to scoot out. Commissioner?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Thanks for this presentation. One quick question about the Oracle implementation. That's what I do for my full-time job, so I was curious about some more of the nuts and bolts stuff, but maybe we can have an offline conversation. I was curious, though, with the vendor staff turnover, that's with the implementation partner that we've hired to coordinate? Okay.
Yeah.
At a previous organization, when I had done a similar implementation, we were able to recoup some costs from them, like in the total contract amount as a result for them not fulfilling their obligations. in terms of timeliness. So curious if that's something that you've pursued.
Yeah, I can provide you more information on that, but we're currently renegotiated right now in association with the change orders we have to do to move the timeline. So we do have, the project governance over the project. We're on the steering committee. Doug Matthews sits on it with me, where we were discussing through all those kind of things.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. I know it's a heavy lift too, so I commend everybody for doing their full-time job on top of
Absolutely.
having to implement a new system. So that's not easy.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioners, other questions or comments? I think we should finish up this one, is my opinion.
Engage and connected.
Well, we have 5 minutes, and I don't want to shortchange it. So I actually think we should hold off on the engaged and connected community and the economic prosperity until next week. That would be my preference. I mean, many of us have said multiple times that communication and engaging with community is a priority, so I don't want anyone to have to scoot out and miss that. That would be my preference. Yeah, is that all right, commissioners? All right, so let's finish up this with any additional questions or comments, and then, because I still have public hearing or public comment before we close for today. Commissioners, other questions or comments for this section or this update? Commissioner Isasi?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. Appreciate just trying to prioritize it. We know you all work on it, so we want to make sure we give everybody their time. I think, appreciate the updates about the healthcare pieces. Again, I wasn't able to go through all the questions, but I know we made those decisions strategically. But it's really more so on the side of the values collaborative that we're talking about. My questions are, how do we decide what projects we would go after? Do the departments have the ability to determine if they want to use the internal resources or if an external resource should be used? I'm just thinking about some of the things that we've heard at the Civilian Appeals Board from some of our leaders about some of the frustrations that they've had with our hiring process. So I'm thinking about that in terms of, has that been a priority project? How have we talked to that? I know we have a new CHRO. So I want to recognize that as well. Because I'm interested in that. What does that decision point look like for the department leaders? Yes, I do think we're saving money on contractual services. I also think there's a reason to go utilize contractual services. It's a little bit like this conversation, to me, colleagues, that we're having about the court systems. Where do we best utilize our resources? Full-time FTE. I think the work is important, and also where is the ability to flex in the organization when needed. Hearing the piece about the grants conversation, and then your comment, Commissioner Knight, about what are the opportunities that we're not able to capture, or organizations that might be smaller, have the challenges, but they could serve as the body that applies, and we can provide some other support. I also think about some of the data requests that we've received recently, Mr. Canfield, from different organizations. And so we have all this data, and how are we piecing that together, and how is that helping us when we go and do these applications? So really, so some of this is commentary. I think it's a philosophical point. There have been, like you, Commissioner, I was thinking about my own work. There have been times when, yes, a contractual service would certainly be more expensive, but it would reduce my time to be able to get a finished project. It also doesn't add to my long-term budget in terms of, what I can flex and what I can do. So that's my commentary, but my question is, what is how do we prioritize the projects? And then what is the decision-making authority look like in terms of the departments to utilize internal, I think you said the values collaborative resources.
Are you referring specifically to the innovation projects? Because
yes.
the values collaborative isn't
maybe I'm not using the right terminology. So
yeah, because the values, I just wanted to kind of provide some context, because the values collaborative includes the person who's doing all our wellness initiatives, the person who's doing organizational development.
I would say, like, for example, some of the projects, I think that the one that Jennifer, you spoke on. So just utilizing that as an example of a project. So yes, I'm not saying it correctly, but how would those projects flow to be prioritized or not prioritized, those sorts of things?
Well, it's a consultation with the department. So it's similar to what communications does on the communication side, which is if the department has a need, there's a consultation there to say, okay, well, what is it that you're trying to do? An evaluation of what is the best opportunity at that point. Ultimately, the department gets to make a decision on what they think is going to provide them with the most value. I will tell you, having done this innovation work in a much different style in a different organization, one of the challenges, there are opportunities and there are times where you want to bring somebody in at a consultative level. When we're talking about longer-term organizational change work, there is value in having at least someone inside the organization who has organizational context. Because my experience has been sometimes when you bring in that outside expertise, you spend a lot of time getting them to understand the context of the community of the organization before they're able to then overlay their expertise to that space. So there's always going to be a balance between the two. But there is certainly opportunity and there's value when you talk about how do you get employees at all levels of the organization involved in participating in the application of the values from a day-to-day standpoint, which doesn't necessarily come through all the time when you've got external consultants coming in. Our target is everyone that works here, and everybody has an opportunity to participate, and it happens every day. As opposed to specifically always on a project level basis.
So I don't feel like my question has been answered. And not that you haven't given an example of what happens. Essentially you're talking about what does it look like operationalized inside the city? My question is there a priority? Like everything is a priority, right? But is there a prioritization process of like, hey, this piece in HR could provide this much value, and so we see it hitting on this point or that point? That's my question. Is there a prioritization in it?
Mayor.
I think city manager wants to.
Oh, okay.
I was going to add to.
Okay.
Just right before you made the comment.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. So I think in backing up, so we have department level subject matter expertise, but every department can't prioritize things for the entire organization. So when we do our management retreat in preparation for your commission workshop, that's why we intentionally ask for the commission focus areas. And what are those things in each of our strategic priorities? And so if you look at some of the examples on slide 59 through 61, you'll see those things that have been important to the commission, like improving customer service in the development center or improving public safety outcomes. There was once upon a time a lot of work was being done in the DICE effort, and Jennifer was really central to pulling multiple departments and community stakeholders together. Or, of course, you mentioned the example of the staffing to make sure we recruit and retain. So in addition to the work in terms of looking at our processes, she was assigned on site there for how many months were you there?
For 6 months.
6 months.
So we are doing mapping of the multiple hiring processes.
Yeah.
So yes, that is ongoing as well.
I guess so from an alignment area, it begins with the priorities of the organizational priorities and the commission focus areas to see where we can add added value. And then, of course, empowering the departments to also see beyond commission focus areas, these are some things we need help in that are much more organizational and operational.
Okay, that's helpful. So it would follow that prioritization. I see some of that. But then was there also an aspect where individuals can submit projects to be done? And so that's the prioritization piece that I think is the question I don't have answered.
I would say yes. So a lot of it right now, because we are still sort of early on in this, it's only the second year and 6 months of that was specifically in HR. The different projects that I'm part of do start with departments reaching out, or they're reaching out to leadership and saying that there's something that they need additional assistance with.
Okay. That's helpful to understand, because I think, I get the piece on the organizational prioritization, and then I imagine if somebody has a good experience on something, then they're probably going to tell someone. And then it becomes this, how do you do all the things at one time? So that's my question for the prioritization is like, how does that fall into a queue?
Yes, and also to keep in mind that there are departments who do this work already on their own and aren't in need of assistance. So it's really that supporting the ones that are asking.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I mean, that's the long view here is that as Jennifer works with departments, they build the skills, they're armed with the tools. They have the opportunity to do a lot of that work on a day-to-day basis on their own. That's really going back to the first slide. That's the model that we've tried to build with equity. That's the model that we've built with sustainability. That's the model we want to build with innovation, which is all of us are doing that work. And there's going to be somebody there that's going to be able to be the subject matter expert, but it doesn't mean that they're going to have to do all of the work.
Thank you.
All right, commissioners down here, any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, we'll close that. So commissioners, I'll ask city manager to maybe make a few adjustments to our schedule next week, and we'll add both economic prosperity and affordability as well as connected and engaged communities as part of our budget session next week. All right, thank you all for your update. That's going to take us to opportunity for public comment. So if you are here to be heard, please come forward. You can come up to this podium, give you up to 3 minutes to speak. Please share your name, the city that you live in, and then commissioners, after public comment, we'll adjourn. Hello, Mr. Jones.
Hello, everybody. How you doing, everybody? I'm D. Jones. I'd like to say a story. So Saturday I had a basketball game, and we only had 5 players on our basketball team. We have a roster of 15, but we only had 5 players go down there to K-Zoo, and we hooped versus 10 players. And D. Jones scored 30 points, and I led my team to victory. I'm a very, very good basketball player. I know how it is to have the odds against you. And I'm a very, very, very good basketball player. It was a crazy game, and I can't let you know how coach is just like surprised. But I always knew I could do these things. I just needed the opportunity to shine. And I hear you guys talk about economic development in the court system, and you guys know I developed the Youth Justice Influence League, and I actually finished that esports league in partnership with the 17th Circuit Court, and I used to be that juvenile, and I changed my life in the 360 where I've achieved a lot of things where you guys seen the things that I've achieved. And sometimes I feel like you guys forget about D. Jones. I'm a big dog around here. I'm an alpha. Don't forget about D. Jones because I've helped bring economic change without government help. I've helped bring investment without government help, and now I need you guys' help to strengthen our community. I've done all of this alone. I've done this without anybody's help. Don't forget about D. Jones because I really did this all alone. And I've brought change here. And I've helped kids that are in the court systems get off of probation. I've helped kids be able to build confidence. I've helped our court system see the benefit of gaming, which is one of the largest industries that you can even invest in. It's larger than the NFL. I know that we had the draft here. I was looking at that. Y'all know I was looking at that. D. Jones is like, I wish our city could fit that. I wish we could surpass the billionaires' views, and one day we are. I feel like I could be richer than the Vosses and the Van Dandels, and I am one day. If policies and politics allow somebody to be worth $100 billion, I guarantee you D. Jones would be one of those black people worth hundreds of billions. I already got a vision. I'm going to North Carolina completely for free to go speak to different cities to bring my competitions here that I started here. I know I'm a visionary. I'm going to be a global business leader. I'm even helping in December. We're looking to bring a 7-figure competition, but for Mayor Rosalynn Bliss is going to be into her campaign, and hopefully you help us. Before you go, bring a 7-figure competition. Somebody here will be able to get 7 figures, and that's a large economic boost from an economic perspective. That's an esports league that's black owned. We need that kind of investment. We need y'all help. We need that support. I did this all alone. Don't forget about me because nobody could do this stuff. I know if I ain't apply myself and I ain't could put that passion and I ain't put that out to the universe and go after what I did, everything, it wouldn't have happened. So don't forget about me because I ain't forget about y'all. I ain't forget about my city. I ain't forget about all of the struggles that I seen the city go through. I need y'all help. 7 figures in December, we can create a large economic boost before the year is over.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. All right, is there anyone else who wishes to be heard? All right, seeing none, I'll close that public comment period. And commissioners, that will take us to the end of our meeting today, and we are adjourned.